The fleeting warmth had dissipated, completely replaced by a glacial fury that seemed to freeze the very air around them. The room practically vibrated with her suppressed power. Even Minato, who had confronted countless enemies, including the nine-tailed fox itself, felt a shiver of genuine primal fear. He understood that this wouldn't be a shouting match, this was a reckoning, a judgment. Minato Kushina began, her voice dangerously low, each syllable a poison dart, carefully aimed. Her eyes, usually so full of life and love, were now cold, hard, and unforgiving. Explain. Yourself. The words, though spoken softly, were laced with a venom that cut deeper than any kunai. Minato felt a lump forming in his throat, his mouth dry as sand. He knew that no simple explanation or carefully crafted excuse would suffice. Nevertheless, he had to try. Kushina, please, I know it seems unforgivable, he stammered, unable to meet her gaze, feeling the weight of his actions bearing down on him. He felt like a child caught in a lie, a deception that threatened to destroy everything he cherished. Unforgivable. Kushina's voice erupted, shattering the fragile tense calm like a dropped bass. Tears, not of sadness but of pure unadulterated rage and terror, streamed down her face. It was the most foolish, irresponsible, and cruel thing you could have ever done. Naruto is 8, Minato. 8. He's just a child. Her control, which she had meticulously maintained until that moment, finally snapped. The dam of grief, terror, and betrayal she had been holding back burst, releasing a torrent of raw, untamed emotion. She sagged, her body shaking with the force of her sobs, as tears flowed freely, leaving wet glistening tracks on her cheeks. Minato, witnessing Kushina unravel, felt his heart shatter into a million pieces. He had never seen her like this, utterly consumed by pain and fury, completely broken. He regretted his decision almost instantly, the moment he had given his tacit approval, but seeing her in this state was unbearable, a torment far worse than any physical pain. All that mattered was Kushina's suffering and the agonizing realization that it was his fault. He took a shaky breath, his chest tight with remorse. Kushina, he began softly, his voice trembling with emotion, I understand. You have every right to be furious, to hate me. But please, listen to me. He paused, searching for the right words, and the memory of that morning flooded back, vivid and inescapable. It had begun innocently enough, with a small, determined figure bursting into his office, unannounced and unexpected. Naruto. Dirt smudged his cheeks, and his clothes were slightly rumpled from what was clearly intense training. However, it was his eyes, those blazing orbs of intensity that belied his tender age, an intensity that Minato recognized all too well. It was the same look Naruto had given him when he insisted on joining the academy early, that unwavering, almost frightening determination, that refusal to be denied. Dad, Naruto said, surprisingly firm. We need to talk. Now. Minato knelt, placing his hands on the desk as he met Naruto's gaze. What is it? I'm going to join the ongoing war, Naruto declared. It was not a request but a statement. I'm going to help. Minato kept his voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. Naruto, that's too dangerous, and you're too young. Naruto puffed out his chest, resembling a miniature version of Kushina. I'm not too young. I'm strong. He didn't boast, he simply stated the truth. Minato felt a surge of pride, quickly followed by a wave of icy fear. He had been meticulous in keeping Naruto's rapid progress a secret, but the truth was undeniable. It's not just about being strong, Naruto. It's about survival. People get hurt. People die in war. This is not a game. Naruto's eyes widened, but the fire within him remained. I know, he whispered with chilling conviction. But I have to protect everyone, the village, my friends, you, Mom, and Miss Yumi. That was the moment. Minato saw it, the resolve, the need to protect. His fire, Kushina's fire, blazed in their sun. And he knew, with a sickening certainty, that he couldn't deny it. The academy. He couldn't hold him back then, either. I won't let anyone hurt the people I love, Naruto declared, his small fists clenched tightly. I'll get stronger. I'll be the best, just like you. I promise. The sincerity and determination in his eyes took Minato's breath away. I will do this, whether you like it or not, that look conveyed. Minato attempted to argue and reason with Naruto, but Naruto was relentless, like a smaller, fiercer version of Kushina. He countered every point, pleading, begging, and demanding. He spoke of duty, protection, and the desire to make them proud. He even invoked the spirit of Kushina herself. Finally, Minato's resolve crumbled, worn down by his son and the echo of his younger self. He did not see a child, he saw a shinobi. He saw himself. I'll consider it, he said in a hoarse voice. Carefully. No promises. Naruto's face broke into a radiant smile. Thank you, Dad. Thank you. The memory faded, leaving Minato confronted by Kushina's tear-streaked face, while his own expression twisted into a mask of pain, guilt, and helplessness. I understand he's young, Kushina. I recognize the dangers involved. I realize it may seem insane. But he's not an ordinary child. He possesses that fire, Kushina. Just like you. Just like us. He insisted. He wore me down. His voice cracked, the last remnants of his composure crumbling. He looked at her, his eyes pleading, begging her to understand the impossible choice he had faced. The echo of their own fiery past resonated in Naruto's fierce, unwavering determination. He needed her to realize that he hadn't acted out of malice or neglect, but rather from a twisted, desperate kind of love. A few days after the explosive confrontation between Minato and Kushina, deep within the shadowy, claustrophobic confines of Root headquarters, Danzo Shimura sat in his dimly lit office. The silence was absolute, broken only by the almost imperceptible hiss of a single flickering candle. His solitary, exposed eye, sharp and devoid of warmth, was fixed on an unseen point in the darkness, calculating. "Kumagakure," he muttered. "Their rakeage is a predictable fool yet useful." He steepled his fingers, the candlelight glinting off the bandages that concealed his right arm and eye. He recalled the recent incident, a clumsy power play, yet revealing. Danzo had exploited that vulnerability, a whisper here, a nudge there. The response from the Hyuga clan disgusted him. Pathetic. Weakness masquerading as honor. He had identified an opportunity, a chance to manipulate someone. A carefully placed suggestion could transform the situation into an advantage. His thoughts drifted to Naruto. A fascinating anomaly. He wasn't interested in nurturing Naruto's talent, rather, he sought to harness it, manipulating it to serve his own vision. The boy is too soft, he needs to grasp the true meaning of sacrifice. Konoha's survival justifies any means. A faint humorless smirk played on his lips. The Hokage will be furious if he learns the full truth. A faint thumped prearranged signal. Danzo straightened and said, "Enter." The door creaked open, revealing a masked Root operative kneeling in the shadows. The operative's posture, despite its deference, suggested exhaustion. "Report," Danzo commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. "Danzo-sama," the operative began, "the mission to relocate Naruto Namikaze has encountered unforeseen circumstances." "Explain. And be precise," Danzo said. "As per your guidance, a team of our operatives, posing as a standard Konoha patrol squad, was dispatched to replace the existing guard at the designated remote outpost. This location was selected by the Hokage for its perceived strategic insignificance, serving as a safe haven far from the Kumagakure border conflict." Danzo nodded, almost imperceptibly. The Hokage's naivety, his predictable sentimentality. He believes in peace through diplomacy, yet he fails to grasp the truth. Peace is an illusion, and true security lies in creating the reality you desire. This safe location, it was a vulnerability I deliberately exposed. He steepled his fingers, the faint candlelight glinting off the bandages that concealed his secrets. "I knew the rakeage, that brute, would be tempted." The carefully worded report, accidentally misplaced during a routine information exchange with a less than reputable contact, a contact known to have dealings with certain brokers who frequent the seedier establishments in the neutral territories, brokers who, for the right price, will sell anything to anyone, including Kumagakure. It was all so easy. The simple matter of planting the seed, suggesting the possibility of a valuable target. A high-ranking Konoha official Sanbing, sheltered in a lightly guarded location, the rakeage's greed did the rest. However, Danzo-sama, the operative continued, the outpost was attacked and completely destroyed before our disguised team's arrival. There were no survivors from the original patrol. The structures were raised in a highly coordinated attack that utilized lightning grillis jutsu and superior numbers. This bears all the hallmarks of a Kumagakure strike force, yet it occurred far from their usual area of operations. It was a deliberate and unexpected move. Danzo's single eye narrowed. Unexpected but not unwelcome. The rakeage took the bait even more aggressively than I anticipated. He overcommitted, revealing his hand and his willingness to break the established rules of engagement. This complicates matters but also creates new opportunities. The Hokage will be forced to react and escalate the conflict. And in escalation lies control. Continue. Our team's Root operatives posing as the relief patrol was discovered dead in a forest clearing, some distance from the destroyed outpost. The scene indicates a swift and precise elimination with minimal evidence of a prolonged struggle. It appears to be a professional ambush, expertly executed, clean, efficient and ruthless. Danzo's internal monologue continued. My operatives dead. A loss, but a calculated one. They served their purpose to maintain the illusion of a standard mission, to provide a credible cover story, and to test the boys' reactions in a real-world combat situation and of extreme duress. Expendable, as always. Their deaths were part of the plan. 1. And the boy? Naruto Namikaze? Danzo inquired, his primary interest now fully piqued. This was the crux of the matter, the unpredictable variable in his meticulously constructed equation. His body wasn't found among the Root operatives, Danzo-sama, nor was it initially located at the outpost. However, the operative continued, we discovered evidence that Naruto Namikaze arrived at the destroyed outpost before our team. We found traces of his chakrafant, but unmistakable in several partially prepared sealing scrolls. Danzo raised an eyebrow, a flicker of genuine interest crossing his face. Sentimentality? Or ingrained training? Is it a weakness or a potential point of leverage? He attempts to preserve the deed of foolish emotional response. Yet, it is also a sign of loyalty, of connection. Something to be exploited. It appears, Danzo-sama, that Naruto Namikaze, upon discovering the massacre at the outpost, initiated the process of sealing the remains of the Konoha shinobi, which is a standard procedure. However, this process was interrupted, resulting in incomplete scrolls and signs of a sudden, violent disturbance within the outpost perimeter. Danzo leaned forward slightly, his single eye narrowing. Ambushed during the act, caught off guard while performing a task that required focus. Yet, here he acted and survived the initial encounter. He possesses a survival instinct and perhaps something more. Based on the evidence, the operative continued, a Kumagakure patrol encountered Naruto Namikaze while he was in the process of sealing the bodies. The initial engagement indicates that he prioritized evasion. His rapid movements and attempts to create distance suggest he was trying to escape and report back. Prudent, Danzo thought. He recognizes his limitations and understands the value of information and self-preservation. It is a necessary quality, but one that can be overcome with sufficient pressure. However, approximately 2 kilometers from the outpost, along what would have been the likely escape route back to Konoha Narrow Avenue, discovered evidence of a second, much larger engagement. A second Kumagakure force, a Hunterman squad, intercepted him. This time, escape was far less likely due to limited maneuverability and overwhelming numbers, at least 15 to 1. Their formations and attack patterns indicated that they were attempting to subdue him and capture him alive. The details of that engagement, Danzo demanded, his voice now tinged with predatory interest. The battle was brutal, Danzo-sama. It served as a testament to the boy's unexpected resilience and a disturbing display of his potential. The combat was intense and desperate, characterized by close-quarters engagement without the use of larger-scale jutsu. We confirmed at least 8 kills on the Kumagakure side, with deep penetrating wounds consistent with high-speed piercing attacks. The victims suffered extreme internal trauma, indicative of a light ninja-instanced combat style that targeted weaknesses with lethal precision. It was surprisingly refined and shockingly brutal for someone his age. 2. Danzo's internal assessment: 8 kills against a Hunterman squad. He adapted his fighting style mid-combat. Impressive. The lightning enhancement indicates a natural affinity. The precision displayed could be innate talent or perhaps something darker, something awakened by trauma and the necessity to survive. This brutality is a useful quality, a necessary one. The operative continued, the initial kills were messy, almost frantic, indicative of desperation. Then there was a shift: the approach became cleaner and more precise, almost surgical. He adapted. The final kill, likely the squad leader, was decisive, a single devastating blow. This created a momentary distraction, breaking their formation. 3. He learns, evolves, improvises, and capitalizes on opportunities. Excellent. There was a copious amount of blood found at the scene, Danzo-sama, operative reported, relaying the grim details. Injured? Severely. But alive. The Uzumaki heritage, yet even that has its limits. 4. And yet, he escaped, Danzo stated, his voice a low murmur. Yes, Danzo-sama. Beyond the second engagement site, multiple tracks diverged and led away. He utilized the shadow clone jutsu. Danzo's single eye narrowed slightly. Shadow clones clever, resourceful, and demonstrating an aptitude for misdirection. However, they also indicate desperation. To employ them in his current condition is reckless, yet effective. The boy possesses surprises. One set of tracks, the operative continued, was significantly different from the others. They were heavier, dragging slightly, and accompanied by a substantial trail of blood. This indicates the original Naruto Namikaze. Despite being severely wounded, he continued to move east toward Kumagakure territory rather than back to Konoha. Danzo's breath caught, a nearly imperceptible pause in his otherwise stoic demeanor. Toward Kumagakure. Why? Was he disoriented? Delirious from blood loss? Possibly. But to continue moving toward the enemy suggests something more: a profound disorientation or a desperate subconscious attempt to avoid capture. Or is there something else? No matter. Did any Kumanon survive the ambush? Danzo's voice was a low, menacing rasp. Initially, yes, Danzo-sama. A few were pursuing the clones. However, the assigned perimeter team intercepted and eliminated all survivors. No one remains alive who could compromise the mission or reveal the intricacies of what transpired there. The operative's tone was cold and efficient. Danzo nodded, a grim satisfaction flickering in his eye. Clean. No loose ends. The Raikage will believe it was a successful strike with a dead target. The Hokage will mourn and escalate the conflict. Both will play right into my hands. Continue the investigation, Danzo commanded. Find Naruto Namikaze discreetly. Do not engage. Observe, track, and report everything: his movements, condition, and the reason for his journey toward Kumagakure. Is it disorientation, or is there something more? He paused, his single eye sharp. He must not fall into Kumagakure's hands alive. They believe him to be the Jinchuriki, a useful delusion we'll exploit. However, they must not discover the truth. If capture is imminent, intervene. Eliminate his old captors and secure the boy. Only as a last resort, if he is beyond saving, he left the unspoken order clear. Yes, Danza-sama. Confirm every detail of the engagements and the outpost attack. The boy's brutality provides valuable information. He dismissed the operative. Alone, Danzo steepled his fingers. The boy's survival, ruthlessness, and flight toward Kumagakure were all unexpected yet advantageous. They sought to subdue him, he mused, a dry chuckle escaping his lips. The fools believe he possesses the Kyuubi. A chilling smile graced his lips. Kumagakure's misguided belief was a gift. The game had become significantly more complex and far more rewarding for Danzo. Darkness was not an absence, it was a pressure, a suffocating weight behind his eyelids. Then came not light, but pain-jagged shards driving into his skull. A sound tore from his throat, wet and ragged, a gasp that was the price of regaining consciousness. The world blurred, tilting like a capsized boat adrift on a sea of meaningless shapes. Cold seeped in from the damp earth pressed against his cheek, the air thick with decay and the sharp metallic tang of blood. His blood? Where? The question dissolved into static before it could take shape. Agony surged through him, a deep tearing sensation radiating from his core, as if muscles were being forcibly ripped from bone. His lungs burned, each inhale a shallow, painful scrape against smoldering embers. Inside his skull, a relentless hammer pounded out a frantic rhythm. The thick coppery taste of blood coated his tongue, and a faint, wet gurgle echoed deep within his chest with every strained breath. Internal bleeding. He shouldn't be alive. Not after that. The memory flickered, a searing, unwelcome image in the hazy, a blinding blue-white light consuming everything. A roar drowned out creation itself, a terrifying surge of power coursing through him, invading and saturating, not merely surrounding. Genkai Topparegm. The forbidden storm unleashed. The promised Tsunade, shattered. A dead end, chosen in desperation. He attempted to move, a disjointed impulse from a mind adrift in agony. It was futile. His limbs convulsed, consumed by violent tremors that seemed independent of his will. Muscles screamed in denial. White-hot static, the shriek of raw nerves laid bare, coursed through him like phantom lightning, an echo of the power that had ravaged him. He collapsed back onto the unforgiving ground, a choked cry swallowed by the damp leaves. Darkness rushed in, a welcome release promising an end to the torment. Yet, even as it claimed him, the phantom lightning coalesced into another Memorishirp, unwelcome, and wearing Tsunade's face. Her voice, etched with terrifying certainty, cracked like a whip as it articulated this exact agony. The catastrophic cascade. The suicidal cost. The warning he had disregarded. Flashback. The rustle of footsteps first drew Shizune's attention. Naruto appeared at the edge of the veranda, his movements reflecting the precise discipline Fugaku had instilled. He looked unusually serious, his characteristic whirlwind energy present but tightly controlled. He clutched a thick battered notebook, its pages filled with dense script and intricate diagrams that were unmistakably his own. He offered a respectful bow to Tsunade, then a warmer nod to Shizune and the contented pig. Tsunade Abachan, Shizunenichan, he greeted, his voice clear and devoid of its usual boisterousness. He crouched to give Taunton an affectionate scratch behind the ears, receiving a happy oink in return. Hey Taunton. Tsunade cracked open an eye, her gaze critical. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Have you finally decided to grace us with your presence, brat? I thought maybe Fugaku had you practicing the Uchiha superior glare until sunset. She took a deliberate swig from the sake bottle, ignoring Shizune's faint sigh. Hello Naruto-kun. It's good to see you, Shizune offered with a warm smile. Naruto returned it briefly, but his serious expression quickly resettled. He stepped forward and placed the notebook firmly on the low table. Actually, Bachan, I need your help. He met her gaze directly, his red Sharingan flaring to life, three tomos spinning with focused intensity, a subconscious manifestation of his earnestness. I've been working on a new jutsu theory, a Raiten technique. Tsunade sat up straighter, lazy boredom dissipating like morning mist. The unsolicited activation of the Sharingan was a clear signal this was not a whim. The sake bottle was forgotten. A knot of professional nervousness twisted in Shizune's stomach. A new jutsu theory. From him. The Raiten theory. Tsunade repeated, her voice losing its drawl, becoming sharper. She leaned forward, intrigued despite herself. He is Minato's son, Kushina's whirlwind, and Fugaku's prodigy. Stranger things have happened. Is this your theory, brat? Or is it something Fugaku concocted to test my patience? She eyed the notebook. Alright, let's hear it. What grand, probably half-lethal concept have you stumbled upon this time? It's not fully developed, Naruto admitted, flipping open the notebook to reveal frantic calculations and anatomical sketches overlaid with lightning patterns. It's based on concepts I've been studying. Standard Raiten enhancement, like the Raikage's armor, seems to focus lightning around the user. He paused, his excitement palpable. But I wondered what if you could channel it through the body itself. Shizune inhaled sharply, a hand flying to her mouth. Her medical training didn't just reject the concept, it screamed in protest. Tsunade stiffened, curiosity instantly extinguished and replaced by sharp alarm. Her eyes narrowed with an intensely clinical gaze. Hold on, she interrupted, her voice dropping to a dangerously low tone. Define through the body, Naruto. Are you referring to internal chakra saturation with high-intensity Raiten? Yeah. Naruto exclaimed, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere. He pointed to a diagram of lightning invading muscle fibers. It's like soaking everything in muscles, nerves, vital parts with really strong, wild lightning chakra. Not just coating it, but pushing it right in. His eyes sparkled, unaware of the dawning horror on Shizune's face. Wouldn't that make everything super fast? Make your thoughts quicker, your body move faster than anyone could see. Like breaking all the body's safety limits at once. He flipped to another page. You'd build up the power inside, then boom. Release it for super speed or an incredibly strong hit. And what about the inevitable catastrophic physiological consequences of flooding your body with high-voltage electricity? Tsunade interjected, her voice laced with icy disdain. Did your theory take into account what happens when you use your own nerves as live wires, or did that aspect seem less intriguing than the idea of going bam? Naruto hesitated. The material I studied was complex, he mumbled, his certainty wavering under her gaze. It mentioned damage to the pathway's significant strain, but I thought, if you were extremely careful, maybe use seals to help manage it. Pathway damage? Tsunade echoed, her voice dangerously soft as she slowly stood, looming. Naruto, let me be very clear. If you force that kind of Raiten chakra internally, you're not talking about strain. You're talking about flash cooking your nerves. Your heart stopping. Blood vessels bursting everywhere, causing massive internal bleeding. Your tenketsu rupturing, permanently crippling your ability to mold chakra. That's assuming you don't just spontaneously combust. Shizune had gone pale, her hands covering her mouth. She's not exaggerating, she thought, horrified. Medically, it's exactly that serious. He has no idea. This isn't breaking limits, Naruto. Tsunade's voice cracked like a whip, embodying the full force of the Sannin. This is suicide masquerading as innovation. The Raikage's armor is a perfectly controlled external shield. It protects. Your idea invades and tears the user apart from the inside. It is fundamentally and lethally flawed. Naruto recoiled, the harsh medical realities crashing down. His diagrams suddenly looked like childish scribbles outlining a gruesome demise. I didn't realize it would be this bad, he whispered, staring at his hands as if they had betrayed him. Seeing the genuine shock replace his reckless enthusiasm, Tsunade took a deep calming breath, suppressing the terrifying image of him suffering the same fate as her brother, her love. No, she said, her voice gentler now, though still firm. You didn't. Because you are 8 years old, playing with concepts far beyond your understanding. The potential for power blinded you to the suicidal cost. She sat back down. The motivation behind it, she continued, her eyes reflecting a fleeting shadow of past sorrows, the desire to be faster, stronger, to protect. I understand that, Naruto. More than you realize. But this path, this Genkai Topparakm, is a dead end. Literally. I forbid you from pursuing it. Naruto's head snapped up, fear replaced by a surge of frustration. Bachan. I need to be stronger. Faster. How am I supposed to protect anyone if I can't keep up? What if someone comes after Miss Yumi or Izumi? He clutched his notebook, his knuckles white. There has to be some way to gain that kind of power. Tsunade sighed. Strength gained through self-destruction isn't strength, Naruto, it's desperation. There are other methods. She regarded him with keen scrutiny. Tell me truthfully, what specific sources are you relying on? What advanced texts or scrolls have you actually been studying? Naruto averted his gaze. He couldn't reveal the anonymous scrolls, it felt like exposing a hidden trump card. Just reports, stories trying to make sense of it. Her eyes narrowed. Figuring out rank techniques from battlefield rumors. Don't insult my intelligence, brat. Damn it, Minato and Kushina, you raised him to be too stubborn for his own good. Fine, she said sharply. Keep your sources secret. But the path in that notebook is closed. You do not walk it. That is non-negotiable. Doing so is a betrayal of everyone who cares about keeping you alive. She leaned forward, locking eyes with him as he opened his mouth to protest. However, she conceded, her tone shifting, your underlying goal is valid. But you lack the fine control necessary. Therefore, here is my counter-offer: abandon this reckless theory completely. In return, I will personally design and oversee a series of highly advanced chakra control exercises rooted in the most precise principles of medical ninjutsu. This will give you the kind of pinpoint control most jonin never attain. It is the only way you'll ever safely manage advanced jutsu. Her expression hardened. But the moment I even suspect you are revisiting these lethal theories, this training ceases immediately. I will inform Minato and Fugaku. Are my terms absolutely clear? Naruto gazed at his notebook, the repository of his flawed genius. He saw the ghosts in Tsunade's eyes, the shadows of Nawaki and Dan, and understood. Her fury was fear. She's right, he admitted internally, a bitter pill to swallow. It's not just risky, it's lethal. The need for strength lingered, a heavy weight in his chest, but the alternative Tsunade described was oblivion. Reluctantly, he closed the notebook, its cover feeling suddenly flimsy. Yes, Sanada-sama, he replied, his voice subdued yet clear. Your way. Chakra control. He refused to relinquish the notebook. It was a symbol of the potential he still sought, but he would not pursue this specific perilous path. Not now. Not after this. Tsunade held his gaze, assessing the grudging acceptance beneath his stubborn pride. It would have to be enough. A slow exhale released the tension from her shoulders. Good. The single word was a fragile truce. In the ensuing silence, Shizune let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Taunton, sensing the danger had passed, cautiously nudged Tsunade's hand. A tired, genuine smile touched her lips. Then, the shift occurred. Before Naruto could process the ceasefire, Tsunade closed the distance and pulled him into a hug, only slightly less bone-crushing than her lecture. Oof. Bachan. Naruto yelped. Scared me there for a minute, brat. Tsunade said gruffly, her voice muffled against his hair. Finally saw some sense. Stubborn, just like your mother, she pulled back, grinding her knuckles into his scalp with familiar affection. Business is over. Crisis averted. Now, she declared, the storm clouds fully dispersed, let your favorite godmother see how much you've grown. Still too skinny. Is that Uchiha taskmaster forgetting that shinobi need fuel beyond pure spite and intense glares? Shizune let out a fond sigh as the familiar chaos resumed. I was breathing before Naruto managed, rubbing his scalp. This, he reflected, still felt vaguely dangerous, but in a much more manageable way. Nonsense. You survived my lecture, you can certainly survive a hug. Tsunade laughed, her eyes sparkling with mischievous curiosity. Now that the tedious life and death matters are out of the way, you must tell me everything. Spill it, godson. Naruto squirmed. Nothing too interesting, Bachan. Just training, mostly. Training, mostly. Tsunade echoed skeptically, pouring herself a cup of sake. From the looks of that notebook, your training involves flirting with spontaneous combustion. I suppose it runs in the family. Shizune coughed. Lady Tsunade. What? It's true. Tsunade retorted. Listen, brat. I meant what I said. This chakra control training, it won't be easy. It will be tedious and frustrating, manipulating energy on a level most shinobi can't even perceive. Naruto met her gaze, his expression now serious. I understand. If it's the foundation, if it makes me stronger and safer, then I'll do it. The alternative was far worse. Then flashback. The memory fractured, Tsunade's face dissolving as the fragile truth shattered against the relentless agony consuming him. Her warning, her offered path, your way. Chakra control felt like a cruel joke whispered into the roaring void of his pain. Floating, then crashing back into a hazy, pain-filled awareness. Time felt distorted. The sky above, glimpsed through slitted eyes, was a bruised twilight purple. The forest warped around him, skeletal fingers clawing at the fading light. Neurological overload, the jutsu's cruel parting gift. Another memory surfaced, sharp and brutal, impossible acceleration. The world slowing, his own hand a blur of blue-white destruction. A face, contorted in shock, dissolving into red mist. Power borrowed at an impossible price. Then the backlash, crushing, absolute. Darkness. How did I survive? The technique should have killed him. He surfaced once more to a wave of nausea, rolling over as fresh agony tore through his torso. He pushed himself onto trembling hands and knees, the world spinning, bile and blood burning his throat. Phantom static crackled beneath his skin, a constant agonizing reminder. Through the haze, he glimpsed a ravine-walls, a memory of the chase. Hunted. Cornered. He recalled the agonizing intake of breath, channeling the forbidden lightning, his pathways screaming in protest. The invasion of power, the impact, the sickening crunch, then, blissfully empty blackness. He awoke shivering violently, his consciousness snapping back like a frayed rope. A profound chill seeped into his bones, warring with a feverish heat. His body was a battleground. Instinct screamed chakra. Heal. Move. Survive. He reached inward, making a desperate, silent plea. The attempt unleashed a new kind of agony. Raw, searing pain exploded through his chest and limbs. His chakra pathways felt scoured with razors, just as Tsunade had warned. It hurts everywhere. A strangled sob escaped him, and uncontrollable, humiliating tears blurred the fractured world. I need chakra, he tried again, focusing, gathering. Not a spark. No, nothing. It's broken. Bachan was right. The lightning had shattered his internal network. Panic, cold and sharp, sliced through the pain. He had no chakra. He was injured, alone, and vulnerable. He looked around wildly, the forest a suffocating prison of green and brown. Lost. He gripped a tree trunk, the rough bark an anchor in a storm. With a groan that tore from his soul, he dragged his protesting body upright. His reflection in a murky puddle was a ghost bale, streaked with mud and drying blood. Is that me? Crude field bandages peeked from beneath his shredded clothing. Weight bandages. Did I? I don't remember, or did someone else? Who? Angry red burns mapped the jutsu's destructive path across his skin, souvenirs of his recklessness. His body was a ruin, held together by sheer will. His mind was a storm-tossed sea. Yet, beneath it all, something flickered at him, stubborn, infuriating. The Uzumaki spark. Survive. It wasn't a thought, it was a primal command. Survive. Misumi Izumi Kachin Tausen, survive. He pushed away from the tree and took a shuffling, agonizing step. Pain radiated from his leg, and nerve pain shot up his spine like an electric shock. He caught himself, gritting his teeth against a wave of dizziness. Another step. And another. Each movement was a monumental battle. His world narrowed to the next footfall. He didn't know where he was going, he only understood the raw imperative: move. Keep moving. Thirst clawed at his throat. Water. He desperately needed water. Leaning against a large moss-like boulder, stars exploding behind his eyes, he heard its soft, persistent murmur of running water. Real. Hope, fragile and unexpected, flickered. Survival was just down the slope. He half slid, half fell down the embankment, collapsing near the bank of a narrow stream. He plunged his trembling hands into the water, gasping at the icy shock. The cold grounded him, a blessed clarity. He scooped handfuls of water to his cracked lips. The first touch was agonizing, but it was also relief. Slowly, painfully, he drank, his desperate thirst receding into bone-deep weariness. He leaned his head back against the damp earth and listened to the stream. He still lacked the chakra for even basic healing. All he had was time, rest, and stubborn will. The forest felt different here, less oppressive. He spotted a thick patch of moss beneath an overhanging rock ledge and dragged himself to the minimal, drier shelter. He collapsed onto it, his last conscious thought a glance at the strange bandage on his arm. I don't remember putting this on. Sleep claimed him instantly, the heavy, drugged slumber of utter exhaustion and trauma. His body, pushed far beyond its limits, finally demanded its due. Deep beneath Konoha's sun-drenched streets, within the somber heart of Root headquarters, the air hung thick, cold, and stagnant. Ominous shadows consumed the stark stone walls, muffling every sound except for the nearly imperceptible hiss of a solitary candle. Its flame was a lone point of life, flickering valiantly yet futilely against the watchful gloom that emanated from Danzo Shimura's desk. A distortion in the darkness near the entrance resolved into a kneeling Figuria Root operative, masked and anonymous, a living instrument poised for activation. Danzo, concealed by shadows save for the glint in his solitary, observant eye, gave no outward sign of having noticed the arrival. His stillness was absolute, a predator's patience as his mind sifted through possibilities. The operative waited, a perfect vessel of emptiness, before speaking in a perfectly controlled monotone. Danzo-sama, the target, Naruto Namikaze, has been located. He is still alive. A brief calculated pause. His current position is near a water source, east of the secondary engagement site. He is unconscious and in critical condition. Report his status, Danzo commanded, his tone a flat line, devoid of emotion. Severe physical trauma confirmed, Danzo-sama. The patient exhibits fluctuating consciousness. Any attempt to mold chakra results in systemic failure and visible agony, the operative recited the grim facts. The damage is consistent with catastrophic backlash from a high output rate and technically the one previously discussed with Senju. So, he utilized it. Danzo's mind raced, the information slotting neatly into his cold calculus. The forbidden technique Tsunade cautioned against. Reckless defiance, yet it demonstrates a desperation that can be molded. The damage is severe, permanent impairment likely. A broken tool, perhaps, but a far more malleable one. The engagement with the Kumo Hunterman squad concluded several days ago, the operative continued. The target lost consciousness due to his injurious multiple lacerations and a deep abdominal puncture. Bleeding out was imminent. The observation team intervened, applying minimal field dressings to stabilize him. Stabilized by Root, Danzo noted internally. A necessary deviation. Uzumaki's vitality has been pushed beyond its limits. Abduction is now impractical, it would reveal our hand. Let him remain broken. For now. External threats? Danzo inquired. Negative, Danzo-sama. All Kumo survivors were eliminated by perimeter teams in accordance with protocol. Our stabilization was carried out under complete stealth. The target is isolated, remote, and entirely vulnerable. Perfect. A flicker of cold satisfaction stirred in the darkness. Isolated. Vulnerable. Untraceable. His survival is now secondary, Danzo stated, his voice echoing flatly in the cold chamber. The situation presents an opportunity. We must shift our focus. His command was swift and precise. Prepare an intelligence packet. Contents Outpost 13, confirmed destroyed by a larger-scale Kumo strike force. Advanced Rayton signatures detected. Both assigned Konoha Patrol's initial and really fair confirmed Kia. He paused, his single eye fixed on the operative. Naruto Namikaze is to be completely omitted from this report. His survival, his condition, the use of the Rayton technique, our intervention of this reaches the Hokage through official channels. Is that understood? Hi, Danzo-sama. No hesitation. Leak this packet. Protocol 7 The concerned citizen. Ensure it is untraceable. It should appear as intercepted enemy communication or a report from a panicked border informant. Organic. Accidental. It must reach Hokage intelligence within the hour. Minato will receive it, Danzo envisioned, the moves on the board playing out in his mind. Predictable in his diligence and sentimentality. The fall of Outpost 13 confirms a massacre. Kumo's aggression is validated. He will have no choice but to escalate. An escalation he cannot control. Final orders regarding the target, Danzo continued. Maintain minimal passive sensory surveillance. Confirm status Ramatelyev, deceased, moved. Do not approach again. Report only if his condition becomes immediately critical. Any further action requires my direct authorization, contingent solely on strategic value. If Konoha forces conduct a search, root presence must remain undetected. Exercise absolute discretion. Hi, Danzo-sama. Oh. The operative bowed and melted back into the shadows, vanishing as completely as if he were merely a figment of the gloom. Danzo remained, the candle flame dancing in his eye. Let Minato grapple with the loss of his men, with the specter of war. Let him dispatch search parties into the wilderness. Perhaps they will find the boy broken, weak, and easily molded into a narrative of my choosing. A humorless smirk, thin as a razor's edge, touched his lips before being swallowed once more by the shadows. The boy was a powerful asset, conveniently sidelined, his very existence now a weapon held in reserve. Deployed or discarded, as needed. Less than an hour after the order was given, the first ripple of Danzo's machinations struck the heart of Konoha. An anonymously delivered intelligence packet landed in the Hokage's office like a physical blow, the single sheet of thin, nondescript paper feeling heavier than lead in Minato Namikaze's hand. He stared at the sparse chilling lines, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of his heavy oak desk. The intelligence division had flagged the document Imidai Telyot's untraceable source assessed as high credibility, marked as urgent priority. Outpost 13 destroyed. Both assigned patrols Kia. Residual signatures consistent with advanced Kumo Rayton. Each phrase struck like a hammer against a fragile piece he had worked so hard to maintain. He slammed his fist onto the desk, the solid wood vibrating violently under the impact, jarring the framed photograph of his smiling family, Kushina's vibrant hair, Miss Yumi's bright eyes, Naruto's determined grin. Kumo. He growled, the name escaping as a low snarl, a sound foreign to the usually calm office space. His blue eyes, typically mirroring the tranquil sky, now gleamed with a menacing intensity. The gentle leader was gone, replaced by the cold, focused fury of the yellow flash. This was a flagrant act of aggression, a calculated insult aimed squarely at Konoha. His hand shot out, instinctively locating the concealed button beneath the desk surface, activating a direct line to his Anbu command. Eagle, his voice was tight and clipped, infused with an authority that demanded immediate compliance. Assemble Squad 4. Priority Alpha mission. Locate Jiraiya-sama immediately and bring him here. Now. He paused, the image of Naruto's trusting face flashing through his mind, the ache of parental fear clashing fiercely with the iron will of the Hokage. Inform him the matter is classified level Alpha confirmed Kumagakure aggression deep within Fire Country. His presence is required by order of the Hokage. Another pause, the internal struggle almost palpable. If he resists due to his research, Minato's voice hardened. The decision was made. Authorize necessary, non-lethal force. Emphasize non-lethal, Eagle. I need him here, conscious and coherent. Immediately. Hi, Hikage-sama. The voice crackled back, followed by the click of the disconnected line. Minato leaned back, the initial surge of fury giving way to a profound gut-wrenching worry. He loathed this, loathed exerting his authority over the man who was practically family, but Konoha couldn't afford delay. He needed Jiraiya's spy network, his strategic insight, his power. The thought of Naruto, his son, assigned to that very sector, now caught in a confirmed Kumo strike zone, was a cold fist clenching viciously around his heart. Why didn't I give him one of my kunai? The self-reproach was a fresh wound, sharp and biting. A simple Horatian Markera lifeline. It was an unforgivable oversight, born from a foolish desire to grant his son independence that now felt criminally negligent. The sheen of the image of her face, contorted in the all-consuming rage born of love and loss, filled him with a dread that rivaled the threat of war. She'll never forgive me. I'll never forgive myself. He squeezed his eyes shut, ruthlessly suppressing the paralyzing fear beneath the cold, necessary resolve of his office. Worry won't help him now. Action will. Roughly 10 minutes later, the heavy office door burst open, not with a knock, but with a distinct yelp. Watch the merchandise and the unmistakable sound of a scuffle. The female Anbu operative, Eagle, materialized from the doorway, her entrance a paradox of fluid silence amidst the chaos she navigated. Her porcelain eagle mask was perfectly centered, and through its narrow slits, her eyes sparked with controlled annoyance. She firmly grasped Jiraiya by the ear, her grip intentionally, painfully tight, and propelled the protesting Sannin into the office. "Unhand me, woman. Ow. Do you have no respect for your elders? Minato. Call off your attack dog." Jiraiya complained, attempting and failing to pry her strong, black-gloved fingers from his no-throbbing earlobe. He was more disheveled than usual, robes askew and fresh ink smudging his cheek. Minato fixed a cold, unwavering gaze on his sensei. The sheer intensity radiating from him's palpable weight of Hokage authority mixed with barely suppressed, urgent anxiety finally pierced Jiraiya's bluster. He fell silent. The eagle, sensing the shift, released his ear with a final contemptuous flick and melted back into the shadows by the door, a taut, vigilant guardian. "Sensei," Minato's voice was dangerously quiet, a low frequency that sliced through the air like chilled steel. "Stop whining. Sit down. And listen." Jiraiya straightened up, the usual bravado gone, replaced by a growing seriousness. He saw the crumpled report on the desk, the grim set of Minato's jaw, the weary exhaustion around his eyes that clashed with a fierce burning resolve. "This is bad," Jiraiya knew instantly. War level bad. He pulled up a chair, the legendary Sannin replacing the incorrigible researcher in an instant. Minato didn't speak. He slid the intelligence packet across the desk. Jiraiya's expression shifted from annoyance to intense concentration as he read. His eyes, suddenly sharp and analytical, scanned the stark facts. Outpost 13 destroyed, patrols Kia, Kumo Raiden signatures. "It fits," Minato stated grimly, his knuckles white. "Outpost 13 went dark 2 days ago. It missed its last 2 radio check-ins. Their relief patrol is also overdue." He took a ragged breath. "I delayed a full border alert," hoping he trailed off, the unspoken name Naruto hinging heavy in the air. "This leak confirms it wasn't equipment failure. It was an attack." Jiraiya looked up, the full weight of the implication settling on him. "This confirms the whispers from my network," he said, his voice low and serious. "Unusual Kumo movements, Hunterman squads, chakra signatures indicating mobilization. I thought it was posturing, but this." He tapped the report. "This is an outright attack. The target is insignificant, the location deliberately conspicuous. It's brazen. They think we're weak," Minato said, his voice sharp. "Still recovering from the Kyuubi, underestimating our strength. This is a provocation. Either way," his voice became a blade of resolve, "I need eyes on the ground. Now." "My network is yours," Jiraiya asserted, biting his thumb hard enough to draw blood. The time for analysis was over. He slammed his bloodied palm on the floor. "Guchius no Jutsu." A puff of smoke dissipated to reveal Kazoku, the lean, efficient messenger toad. "Jiraiya-sama, Hikage-sama," he greeted, his voice a low rasp. "An urgent summons." "The highest priority," Jiraiya confirmed. "Wadiri reconnaissance. Grid centered on Outpost 13, extending east to the border. I need site status, Kumo 4 signatures, details of the engagement, any and all tracks. Relay deployment orders through the entire network immediately. Speed is paramount." Kazoku absorbed the orders with an unblinking gaze. "Understood. Coordinating network deployment now." With a silent puff of smoke, he was gone. Jiraiya turned to Minato, the earlier bravado a distant memory. The silence stretched between them, thick with a shared, unspoken fear. If anything happened out there, Minato, if Naruto was anywhere near that. Jiraiya's voice was hoarse, his confidence shaken. "The network will find him." He didn't need to articulate the terror they both felt for the boy, his student's only son, adrift and alone in a confirmed Kumo Kilzon. While the gears of Konoha's intelligence network began to turn, Naruto drifted in a world devoid of strategy or hope. He resurfaced from the depths of unconsciousness not gently but violently, jolted back by a full-body tremor. Pain was a roaring baseline, punctuated by spasms that felt like being electrocuted from the inside out. The world swam, a nauseating kaleidoscope of blurred shapes. He choked, a ragged, wet sound. Thirst water, the nearby stream murmured, a cruel temptation. The mere thought of moving sent phantom lightning through him. Then, a new sound cut through the internal static. A low, wet croak. His eyelids fluttered, heavy as stone. Through the sickening blur, a mottled shape emerged near the water's edge. Faintly glinting golden rings seemed to fixate on him. The shape froze. What? The jolt of awareness was fleeting, overwhelmed by the tremors. Help. Hope, impossibly fragile, flickered and died. Before the impression could fully form, the shape vanished in a near-silent puff of white smoke. Smoke. The effort to decipher the image sent shards of pain through his skull. The tremors intensified. He squeezed his eyes shut, retreating from the stimuli, from the false hope that was its own form of torture. Darkness flooded back, laced with phantom lightning. A final violent spasm arched his back, tearing a strangled cry from his lips before his muscles failed entirely. The world dissolved into absolute black. His breathing hitched, shallow, a faint wet rattle sounding deep in his chest as the cold earth seeped into his bones. Dawn's light was not gentle. It slashed through the thin paper of the shoji screens, stark and gray, a mirror to the cold dread that had woken Izumi long before the sun itself crested the compound walls. Sleep offered no refuge, only fragmented anxieties given form. Naruto's voice, distant and distorted, as if calling through water, the phantom sensation of reaching for him and grasping only cold air, a pervasive, suffocating silence that clung to her long after her eyes snapped open. Several days. An eternity measured in unanswered questions. His last clone message, brimming with his usual irrepressible energy, felt like a relic from another lifetime. He always checked in. Always. This silence wasn't negligence, it felt calculated, a deliberate secret wrapped in the suffocating veneer of normalcy. "He's okay," the mantra felt brittle, close to shattering. She forced herself up, the cool wood floor a sharp contrast to the nervous heat prickling her skin. "He's strong. Faster than anyone I know, except maybe Minato-sama or Shisesan. He wouldn't get caught easily." But strength was not invincibility, and the heavy silence from the adults suggested a truth far more complex than a simple delay. Her morning routine became a ritual of control, small acts of discipline against the internal chaos. Each fold of her training gear was precise, the knot securing her high ponytail of dark Uchiha hair severe and tight. A fleeting glance in the mirror confirmed the dark smudges beneath her eyes and the tense set of her jaw. She forced her features into the practiced neutrality expected of Fugaku Uchiha's daughter, a mask she hoped would deflect her mother's keen gaze. Downstairs, the familiar scene felt subtly, unnervingly wrong. Her father, Fugaku Uchiha, sat opposite her mother, already immersed in a police force scroll. His posture was, as always, ramrod straight, his high-collared robes immaculate. The stern lines of his face seemed etched deeper this morning, his focus absolute, perhaps too absolute. Makoto Uchiha moved with practiced grace, setting down bowls of miso soup. Her smile was warm, her lavender kimono elegant, but her eyes held a fleeting shadow, a careful guardedness that hadn't been there last week. "Ohio, Tausen, Kasen," Izumi greeted, sliding into her usual place on the tatami mat. "Nichin." Sasuke, a miniature whirlwind of dark hair, immediately abandoned his wooden blocks and made a wobbly beeline for her lap, proudly holding up a slightly misshapen clay shuriken. "Ohio, Izumi," Fugaku replied, his onyx eyes flicking up from the scroll for only a fraction of a second in acknowledgement, nothing more. "Morning, dear," Makoto said, her voice a shade too bright as she settled Sasuke with his own small bowl of rice. "Did you manage to rest?" "Hi, Kasen," Izumi lied. The air was thick with unspoken words. The meal proceeded under this strained normalcy. Fugaku was a pillar of silence. Makoto gently guided Sasuke's attempts to feed himself, offering Izumi safe neutral topics: weather, an upcoming clan gathering. Izumi ate mechanically, her analytical mind dissecting the scene. The lack of questions was deafening. Usually, her mother would gently probe about the academy, perhaps sharing an amusing anecdote from Kushine Abasan about Naruto. Today, Naruto was a ghost at their table. Fugaku's silence wasn't unusual, but Makoto's active avoidance was a klaxon in the quiet room. Deciding to force the issue, she kept her tone deliberately casual. "Kasen, have you spoken with Kushine Abasan recently? I was just wondering, Naruto-kun hasn't sent a clone in several days. His mission must be quite demanding." Fugaku's hand paused, mid-sip of tea. Izumi caught it, barest hesitation. For less than a heartbeat, his eyes hardened, a flicker of a man assessing a distant threat. It was an almost imperceptible micro-expression, but to Izumi, who had spent a lifetime decoding her father's stoicism, it was a profound crack in the facade. Makoto's smile tightened. "Kushina-san has been busy with Miss Yumichin, I imagine," she replied smoothly, her attention suddenly captivated by a loose thread on Sasuke's shirt. "And as your father said, active missions require complete concentration. Naruto-kun understands his duty." Duty? Concentration. The words were walls, built to dismiss her concern. The coordinated deflection was unmistakable. Her parents knew she was worried and they were deliberately keeping her in the dark. A cold dread washed over her. What could be so bad they have to hide it from me? After breakfast, Yugaku left with only a curt nod. As Izumi helped clear the table, the silence between her and Makoto was heavy with unanswered fears. Meticulously, she checked her Jirkinai shuriken medical kit. Preparation was the only tangible thing she could control. She hugged Sasuke, bowed to Makoto, whose hand lingered on her shoulder a moment too long, a silent gesture of comfort that only amplified her anxiety. Leaving the suffocating quiet of her home, she hurried towards the main gate, eager for the relative normalcy of her friends. Hana Inuzuka was waiting at the bridge, her practical grey tunic and earth-tone pants a familiar sight. Her spiky brown hair resisted any attempt at neatness, framing a face marked with the red fangs of her clan. At her feet, the Himari triplets Genmaru, Tetsumaru, and Sumimaru were fluffy bundles of tumbling energy. Upon seeing Izumi, Tetsumaru, already showing a clear preference, gave a clumsy yip and stumbled towards her, tail wagging furiously. "Someone's happy to see you," Hana chuckled, scooping the pup up. "Morning, Izumi. Slept any better?" "Aheo, Hanachan." Izumi gently scratched Tetsumaru behind his ears, receiving a flurry of uncoordinated licks. "Not really. You?" Hana sighed. Sumeka-san was tense again. "Just said focus on your training and don't worry." Easy for her to say. She lowered her voice. "Still feels like everyone's holding their breath, waiting." As they walked, the village carried on with its morning routines, but Izumi couldn't shake the sense of being watched, of a great and terrible event unfolding just beneath the calm surface. They found Saki Yamanaka already seated inside the classroom. Her pale blonde hair was neatly braided, and her light purple top and dark shorts were practical, but with a touch of her clan's aesthetic. Her bright blue eyes, however, were alert and deeply observant. Sumimaru, the calmest of the pups, immediately settled at her feet, while Tetsumaru made a beeline for Izumi's lap the moment she sat down. "Aheo," Saki murmured, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Ready for another thrilling day of fundamental drills?" "Joy," Hana replied dryly, prying Genmaru's jaw from the leg of a bench. Their instructor, Dakoku Funeno, entered, his quiet confidence commanding immediate silence. "Fundamentals," he announced, his sharp gaze sweeping the room. "Today, we build upon yesterday's foundation. Advanced chakra control, then applied to jutsu. Maintain focus." The exercise was deceptively simple. Maintain 3 levasin on the forehead, 1 on the back of each hand while moving through a basic kata. For Izumi, it was a battle. As she moved through a slow block, a leaf fluttered from her hand. She gritted her teeth, refocusing, the demand for precise multi-point control a harsh clarion call against her distracting thoughts. It was a struggle just to keep them adhered. The technical perfection she usually displayed felt hollow, a shell without substance. The afternoon brought sparring. "Ichiha, Inuzuka. You first." Across the training ground, Izumi saw her own frustration mirrored in Hana's determined eyes. They bowed. Hana exploded forward, her attack a ferocious low-to-the-ground blur. Ichiha efficiency met Inuzuka ferocity. Hana's relentless assault, a flurry of jabs, palm heels, and snapping kicks forced Izumi into a defensive posture. Faster than usual today, Izumi noted, narrowly avoiding a feint. Hana was clearly channeling her own frustrations into the spar. Seeing an opening, Izumi surged forward with a precise elbow strike. Hana anticipated it, twisting away and countering with a spinning backfist that forced Izumi to duck. The relentless pace was taking its toll. As another wave of worry for Naruto flickered through her mind, her unwavering Uchiha concentration broke for a fraction of a second. That was all Hana needed. Painting high, Hana dropped low and swept Izumi's supporting leg with brutal efficiency. Izumi's balance vanished. Before she could initiate a substitution, a solid shoulder check sent her tumbling to the dust. Instantly, Hana was on her, a knee pinning her arm, a kunai held firmly near her throat. "Point, Inuzuka," Dakoku called, a hint of approval in his impassive voice. Hana retracted the kunai and offered a hand, grinning and breathless. "Gotcha. Felt like you almost had me with that elbow, though." Izumi accepted the hand, forcing down her frustration. "Good match, Hanachan. That sweep was perfectly timed." During the cooldown, Saki's perceptive gaze found her. "Your form was sharp today, Izumi-chan, more intense than usual. But right before the sweep your focus wavered. Everything okay?" Saki's skill wasn't in reading emotions, but in seeing the minute physical tells that betrayed them. Izumi stiffened, looking away. "Just focused on the spar, Saki-chan. Lost my footing." Saki didn't push. "Okay. Well, whatever it is, that intensity, it's impressive, even if it slipped." The dismissal bell rang, and Hana, ever practical, made her suggestion. "Okay, well, time for dango like always, huh? Our usual spot." Izumi hesitated. The thought of facing the quiet dread at home was unbearable. "Actually, Hanachan, I think I might head straight home." "Straight home?" Saki chimed in, stepping smoothly beside her. "But it's tradition. And Hana won, so she needs a sugar rush." Hana puffed up her chest in agreement. Saki's voice became gentler as she looked at Izumi. Besides, walking home alone and worrying won't change anything right now, will it? Come on. Just for a bit. To the dango shop. The invitation, so simple and kind, was a lifeline. The routine felt safe, familiar. Maybe it would be better than confronting the heavy silence of the Uchiha compound. She let out a slow breath. Alright, she conceded, the words softer than usual. To the dango shop. Just for a little while. Relief washed over Hana's face. Yes. Victory dango. Let's go. The dango shop was a small bubble of warmth against the encroaching afternoon chill. As they settled into their usual bench, the girls fell into an easy rhythm of complete relief exercise was impossible. Akira-sensei expected them to be levitating by next week, and pop quizzes on shinobi history were a form of cruel and unusual punishment. The familiar ritual chipped away at the tension. Gradually, the conversation shifted to the equally challenging realm of family. Hana lamented Kiba's misguided attempt to give Akamaru a mudbath, while Saki recounted her cousin Ino's latest foray into redecorating the family flower shop by pulling the petals off prize-winning roses. The mundane chaos of toddlerhood felt refreshingly normal. Izumi found herself smiling faintly, sharing a story about Sasuke's attempt at meditation. He sat cross-legged, screwed up his face, and fell asleep for 30 seconds. Then insisted he'd reached enlightenment when he woke up drooling on the tatami mat. The simple act of sharing, of laughing softly at everyday frustrations, was grounding. It didn't erase her fear, but it pushed it back, allowing her a moment to breathe. The knot in her chest hadn't dissolved, but perhaps it had loosened just a fraction. Okay, Hana announced, looking significantly happier. Distraction achieved. Izumi met her gaze, then Saki's. Their concern was open, uncomplicated. Yeah, she admitted, the smile feeling more genuine this time. Thanks. I needed that. Anytime, Izumi-chan, Saki said with a small, relieved nod. That's what friends are for. As they left, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows, Izumi felt a renewed clarity. Her friends couldn't give her answers, but their presence was a potent reminder of what she and Narita are fighting for. The grim analysis remained, but now, a layer of determination, bolstered by friendship, had settled beneath it. She reached the Uchiha compound, the familiar stone walls feeling less like a cage. She took a deep breath, smoothing her expression, and walked inside. The silence and unspoken fear still awaited, but she felt better equipped to face it, her resolve sharpened not by worry, but by the quiet strength drawn from her friends. If they won't tell me, the thought remained, but now it carried the weight of reasoned determination, not just panicked urgency. I'll find out myself. Shinobi. We trade pain for purpose. Killing. It's just the currency. The clearing felt suspended between worlds. The only sounds were the ceaseless, indifferent murmur of the nearby stream and the shallow, ragged gasps escaping from the small figure lying broken on a mossy ledge. Jiraiya knelt beside Naruto, one hand resting heavily on the boy's shoulder, a futile anchor against the violent tremors that shook the child's frame. Hours had passed since Gamabunta's reluctant Deperturian eternity measured in stuttering heartbeats and the chilling fluctuations of Naruto's skin beneath his palm, burning feverishly one moment and unnaturally cold the next. He looked impossibly small, swallowed by the vast indifference of the forest. His vibrant Uzumaki life force, usually a roaring bonfire, now flickered like a guttering candle flame against an overwhelming storm. Anything? Jiraiya's voice was a rough rasp, worn raw by anxiety and the damp night air. He didn't look up, his gaze remained fixed on Naruto's face. Amichiyu, the Miyaboku medic toad, carefully adjusted a cool, damp cloth on Naruto's forehead, fully aware that it was a futile gesture. Her professional demeanor was strained, her small brow furrowed with deep concern. His core temperature continues to fluctuate erratically, Jiraiya-sama. The seizures are becoming more frequent, the tremors more pronounced. The systemic shock is worsening. Her assessment was delivered with clinical precision, yet it was underscored by a sense of grim helplessness. Whatever energy sustained him so far is failing. Jiraiya tightened his grip on Naruto's shoulder, sensing the life force sputtering in a battle against itself. Raiden overload, pathway annihilation, chakra rejection, the concepts weighed on him like mountains. Damn it, Naruto, what have you done? The knowledge of those anonymous scrolls flashed through his mind, a fresh spike of guilt twisting in his gut. I should have pressed Minato harder, insisted we investigate the source. Damn it. Where are you, Haim? Jiraiya pleaded silently, his gaze sweeping across the oppressive darkness of the surrounding trees, knowing all too well the ghosts that haunted Tsunade's past. As if summoned by his desperation, the air beside him shimmered. Kazoku, the lean messenger toad, materialized in an ursulent puff of smoke, his golden eyes immediately finding Jiraiya's. Jiraiya-sama, Kazoku rasped, his voice urgent but efficient. Confirmed contact with Kitsaya-sama. Kitsayu is locating Tsunade-sama now and facilitating contact. Maintain stability. Absolute certainty she will mobilize. Before Jiraiya could fully process the wave of relief that crashed over him, Kazoku vanished as quickly as he had appeared. Absolute certainty she will mobilize. Jiraiya clung to the messenger toad's words, to the confidence relayed through Gamabunta, like a drowning man clings to driftwood. His fragile hope was shattered a moment later. Naruto's body arched violently, a strangled cry escaping his throat as another, more severe seizure seized him. His limbs flailed uncontrollably, the tremors giving way to jarring convulsions. Gamachiya reacted instantly, trying to gently restrain him while murmuring soothing words that were completely drowned out by the chaos. "Hold on, kid. Just hold on." Jiraiya urged, his voice cracking, useless words against the raw biological agony unfolding before him. He felt utterly powerless, the legendary Sannin reduced to a terrified bystander watching his student son disintegrate from within. Just as the seizure reached its terrifying peak, a subtle shift occurred in the air. It wasn't sound or sight, but a distinct change in pressure. Jiraiya sensed a vast, serene, yet overwhelmingly powerful presence approaching with incredible speed. It wasn't the explosive arrival of Gamabunta, but something smoother and more pervasive, like the tide surging inland. "Kitsayu." "No, Tsunade." The thought had barely formed when the air directly above the clearing appeared to part, not with smoke, but with a fluid grace that defied the laws of physics. A massive pale-shaped descended division of Kitsayu large enough to dwarf the clearing, her translucent form glowing softly in the moonlight. She was not alone. Standing poised on Kitsayu's vast head was Tsunade Senju, radiating an aura of controlled fury and desperate urgency that crackled like lightning. Her blonde hair, usually tied back, whipped around her face, momentarily untamed. The customary green haori was absent, revealing a simpler gray kimono beneath, suggesting a departure made in extreme haste. Her goldenbrand eyes, sharp and assessing, swept the scene below. Jiraiya kneeling, the medic toad, the watchful Samonsen finally locked onto the small convulsing figure on the moss. Beside her, Shizune stood pale yet resolute, clutching Tauntaun tightly in one arm and a large bulging medical pack in the other. The pig squealed softly, burying his face against Shizune's tunic, overwhelmed by the speed, the tension, and Tsunade's palpable fury. As Kitsayu's division settled gently, its massive form displacing air without disturbing the ground, Tsunade leaped down. She landed with a soft thud that nonetheless conveyed the immense weight of her Sannin status. Shizune followed a half-second later, already fumbling with the clasps on the medical pack. A final, silent pulse of empathy washed over the clearing from the great slug. Naruto-kun Sanada-sama then, Kitsayu's massive division dissolved in a near-silent puff. Tsunade didn't spare Jiraiya a glance, nor did she seem to register Kitsayu's departure. Her entire focus narrowed, honing in on Naruto with terrifying intensity. She saw the violent spasms, the blue-tinged lips, and smelled the faint acrid scent of ozone, clinging to him's unmistakable signature of rampant, uncontrolled lightning. He did it. The thought was a cold, bitter confirmation of her deepest fear, laced with an incandescent fury that made her vision momentarily swim in red. That damned reckless, stubborn little fool. He actually used it after I forbade him. The ghosts of Nawaki and Dan flickered at the edge of her sight, their faces merging with Naruto's pale, agonized features. "No. Not this time. I refuse." "Report." She snapped, her voice sharp and cutting. Though directed at Gamachiyu, her eyes remained locked on Naruto. She knelt beside him, her movements economical and precise, the legendary medic instantly taking charge. Her hands hovered inches above his body, her own chakra flooring it for healing, but for diagnostics. "Sanada-sama," Gamachiyu responded immediately, her voice steady. "Raiden overload, likely self-inflicted catastrophic chakra pathway destruction. Vital signs are unstable and declining rapidly." Jiraiya watched Tsunade's face as the medic toad spoke. He saw no surprise, only a chilling furious recognition. Her anger wasn't just at the diagnosis, it was the rage of someone whose gravest prediction had been confirmed. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. She knew. She knew he was capable of this. "You knew." Jiraiya's voice erupted as he turned on her, the clinical terms now laden with the horror of her prior awareness. "Raiden overload. Pathway destruction. You knew he was experimenting with something this dangerous. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell Minato or Kushina? He's just a kid, Tsunade. If you knew he was toying with forbidden techniques, why the hell didn't you stop him properly?" Tsunade whirled on him, the medic's focus momentarily eclipsed by the Sannin's wrath. "Save it, Jiraiya." She spat, her voice slicing through his accusations like a honed blade. "Yes, I knew." She jabbed a trembling finger toward Naruto, whose body was seized by another agonizing tremor. "Blame me later. Right now, keeping him alive is the only thing that matters." Her fury was absolute. Jiraiya recoiled, silenced not by her logic, but by the undeniable, horrifying truth in her words, and the sheer force of her desperate will. She was right. She turned back to Naruto, the explosive confrontation set aside. "Shizune." Tsunade commanded, her voice resonating with authority. "Prepare everything. Vital function monitors pulse, respiration, neural activity. Adrenaline auto-injector on standby. Cardiac arrest is highly probable. Hi, Tsunade-sama. Shizune replied instantly, her hands moving swiftly, her earlier shock transformed into focused action. Tsunade's hands hovered over Naruto's chest. Standard healing was impossible, the rejection was too violent. Drawing on her immense reserves, she began to channel a different energy, a gentle, incredibly fine wave of pure life force, aimed not at repairing, but at soothing the ravaged pathways, calming the internal storm just enough to create a window. She focused intensely, sweat beading on her forehead. It was like trying to calm a raging ocean with a whisper. For a heart-stopping moment, Naruto's tremors lessened, the spasms easing into shudders. His breathing hitched, then deepened. Is it working? Then, his body arched once more, convulsed by a seizure even more violent than the last. A raw, choked sound erupted from his throat as the fragile calm shattered. Damn it. Tsunade swore, pulling her hands back as if burned. The system wasn't just rejecting external chakra, it was actively attacking any stabilizing influence. Tsunade-sama. Shizune cried out, the monitors spiking erratically. Respiration is dropping. Neural activity is chaotic. No. Tsunade's mind raced. Standard healing was impossible. Soothing was ineffective. What options remained? Her gaze landed on the specific seal Shizune had arranged. A desperate gamble. Shizune. Tsunade's voice was steely, her decision forged in the crucible of desperation. Forget the array. Single primary seal. Prepare for direct infusion. I'm going to force it. It was madness. Driving her most potent healing technique into a body at war with itself was a risk beyond measure. But the alternative, vetoing the thing, was a guaranteed death sentence. She looked down at Naruto's face, contorted in agony. She saw Nawaki. She saw Dan. She saw the boy who had stubbornly wormed his way into her guarded heart. I will not lose another one. Ignoring the sharp intake of breath from Jiraiya and Shizune, Tsunade gathered her chakra. The distinctive diamond seal on her forehead began to pulse, intricate dark lines spreading outward as she prepared to release the massive reserves stored within. A visible pale green aura shimmered around her, radiating so much life energy that the very air felt thick, distorting the moonlight. Shizune, activate the monitors. Be prepared. Tsunade commanded. She placed one hand firmly on Naruto's sternum, ignoring the faint static discharge that tingled against her palm. Forgive me for this, Naruto, she thought, a pang of sorrow mingling with her fierce resolve. But I'm bringing you back, whether you like it or not. With a deep breath, she released the seal. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Naruto's body didn't merely seize, it convulsed with such intensity that it lifted him partially off the mossy ground. A choked, inhuman scream tore from his blue lips as the forced infusion clashed violently with the rejection. The pale green healing chakra visibly fought against the crackling, chaotic blue sparks erupting just beneath his skin. Hold him. Tsunade roared, refusing to break contact. The ground beneath them vibrated with the sheer intensity of the conflicting forces. Jiraiya and Shizune lunged forward, assisting Gamachiyu in restraining Naruto's flailing limbs. Shizune's eyes were wide with terror as she watched the monitors display wildly erratic life signs. Tsunade-sama, his heart rate is spiking. Arrhythmia. Neural overload. Shizune shouted over Naruto's agonized gasps. No. Tsunade gritted out, sweat dripping from her face as her chakra drained at an alarming rate. She fought against a rejection, striving to overwhelm it, to force regeneration, even as his body threatened to tear itself apart. The markings of the diamond seal receded slightly, indicating the immense cost. Months later. Naruto drifted on a vast gray ocean of non-being. Then, almost imperceptibly, a distant shore came into focus. Awareness returned not like a sunrise, but like the slow ebb of a tide, leaving faint impressions behind. Muted sounds registered, first soft, steady rhythm of beep 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 from somewhere nearby, accompanied by a low, indistinct murmur of voices. He struggled against the immense weight on his eyelids. With tremendous effort, they fluttered open to a world devoid of sharp detail. A plain white ceiling swam into focus. The air carried a scent that was sharp, sterile, and utterly foreign to antiseptics and clean linen, a stark contrast to the damp earth and metallic tang of blood that lingered at the fractured edges of his memory. Weakness was an anchor, settling deep into muscles that felt unresponsive and alien. He tried to sense his chakra and act as natural as breathing, but found only a profound stillness and unnerving quiet where a familiar fire should have been. Yet, its ghost lingered, a deep, persistent ache resonating from his bone marrow outward, a constant, weary reminder of the damage he had endured. Where am I? The tranquil rhythm of the room was interrupted as the door slid open softly, revealing Shizune. She carried a tray laden with the tools of long-term care, and the faint shadows under her eyes spoke of extended vigils. She moved toward the monitoring instruments, her expression one of focused professionalism. The sound escaped Naruto's throat, a dry, weak groan. He concentrated all his feeble will into lifting his right hand. It felt like lead, but the limb responded, twitching slightly against the crisp white sheet. The simple movement sent a dull, protesting ache through his arm, but it was his movement. Shizune froze mid-step, her hand hovering over a monitor. The routine was shattered. She turned her head, her eyes widening as she registered the sound, the twitch. Her gaze locked onto his face. Naruto's bleary, unfocused blue eyes were open wider, blinking sluggishly. Time stopped. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor became the only sound in the universe. Naruto-kun. The name escaped her lips as a fragile whisper, her voice trembling uncontrollably. The tray tilted, forgotten in her suddenly numb fingers. Vials, a bowl, and a cup tumbled downward, striking the polished floor. The sharp clatter and final shattering crash echoed in the quiet room as broth and medicine splashed across the pristine tiles. Shizune didn't flinch, oblivious to the chaos she had created. Her hands flew to cover her mouth, stifling a sound that was part sob, part choked gasp, part incredulous, hysterical laughter. Tears, hot and sudden, welled and spilled over, tracing glistening paths down her pale cheeks as she stared, transfixed, at the bed. He's awake. After all this time Sanada-sama, he's finally awake. The world was a wash of gray and green, seen through the narrow, unblinking eyes of a wolf. Rain, a constant and monotonous hiss, slicked the oversized leaves of the forest canopy, each drop a tiny, distorting lens that shattered the failing light of dusk. The air was thick and heavy, tasting of wet earth, rotting wood, and the deep, clean scent of pine. Below, the forest floor was a treacherous tapestry of slick mud and dark, grasping roots. For the figure perched motionlessly on a high, moss-licked branch, it was simply the weather. Business as usual. Anbu Captain Wolf did not feel the cold, nor the dampness that seeped through the joints of his armor. He was a statue carved from shadow and duty, a part of the storm itself. He raised a hand, fingers gloved in black leather, forming a precise, universally understood signal target-sighted. 2 patrols, 4 men. Hold positions. His internal clock, honed by years of training and 1,000 sleepless nights, ticked away the seconds as his mind processed the scene below. Mercenaries. Not Iwanen. Sloppy formation, their guard patterns are lazy. Overconfident. He catalogued their weapons, their worn gear, the careless way one of them spat on the ground. They were moving through the Land of Fire's border territories like they owned them. A fatal miscalculation. Their scout is exposed. Too far ahead of the main group. An amateur's mistake. The calculus was simple. Joyless. He shifted his weight, a movement so subtle it was indistinguishable from the swing of the branch in a faint breeze. His hand dropped, fingers curling into a new, sharp sign. I take the scout. Engage on my mark. He didn't wait for acknowledgement. He didn't need it. His squad, Boar and Weasel, were veterans, extensions of his will, silent and absolute. He pushed off the branch, descending not with a sound, but like a drop of heavy water detaching from a leaf to begin its long, silent fall. The rain masked his descent, the gray sky swallowing his dark form. The mercenary scout, huddled under a thick fern for a moment of miserable shelter, never even looked up. His last sensation was a faint whisper of displaced air behind him. Wolf's tanto, a short non-reflective blade, slid from its sheath with a faint wet shink. It was a predator's economy of Michonne, a single fluid movement that brought the blade in a precise horizontal slide across the man's exposed throat. Wolf's other hand was already there, clamped firmly over the man's mouth, stifling the gurgling cry before it could be born. He held the dying man for a moment, supporting his weight, and then gently, silently, lowered the body into the muddy embrace of the undergrowth. No thrashing. No loud thud. Just a quiet final exhalation. He was already moving before the body was fully settled, melting into the deeper shadows at the base of a massive cypress. He tapped the small comm unit tucked into his throat guard. A single coded click, sharper than a raindrop, was his only signal. It was all his squad needed. The forest floor erupted. Boar rose from the mud and ferns like an avenging earth spirit, his own blade a dark blur, as he engaged the rear of the main patrol. Weasel dropped from a low-hanging branch, a silent viper striking the flank. The mercenaries reacted a fatal half-second too late. Their shouts of alarm were cut short, turning into choked wet gasps. The brief brutal clang of steel on steel was jarring in the oppressive quiet, then it too was silenced. Wolf moved to intercept the patrol leader, a large bearded man who had just managed to draw a crude-looking axe. The man was turning, his eyes wide with shock and confusion, trying to comprehend the ambush that had materialized from nothing. He never saw Wolf. He only felt a sudden, explosive impact on the side of his knee as Naruto, using his momentum, drove the pommel of his tanto into the joint. The man's leg buckled with a wet pop. As his scream began, Wolf's blade slid cleanly through the back of his neck, severing his spinal cord and silencing the cry before it could fully form. As he moved, a familiar protest echoed through his own body. Don't push the leg. Pivot on the left. Keep the core tight. It was a constant internal litany, a negotiation with his own damaged hardware. He was not the invincible force he appeared to be, he was a broken weapon, carefully managed to maintain its lethal edge. Silence returned, absolute and profound. The rain continued its steady, indifferent hiss, washing the fresh blood from the dark green leaves, turning the mud a richer, darker shade of brown. Boar and Weasel emerged from the gloom, their blades already wiped clean. They gave their captain a sharp professional nod. "Area secure, Captain Wolf," Boar reported, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "No survivors." Wolf gave a curt nod in return, his own blade already sheathed. He gestured with 2 fingers, the motion sharp and economical. "Sanitize. Search for intel." His squad began the grim work of evidence removal, searching the bodies for scrolls or identifying marks. They worked with the practiced efficiency of men who have done this 100 times before, leaving their captain to his role as watchman. Wolf turned away, ostensibly to scan the perimeter, and walked a few paces deeper into the forest's gloom until he was completely shielded from his men's view by the massive ancient trunk of an oak. The facade of the unfeeling captain cracked. He leaned his shoulder heavily against the rough bark as the world tilted. He slowly raised a trembling, gauntleted hand, not to his mask, but to his lower abdomen, pressing down hard against the armor. It did nothing to stop the throb. It was always there, a visceral ache that radiated from his core. A phantom echo of shredded chakra pathways, a fire banked low, a bed of embers that never truly cooled. It was the price he had paid for his power, for his escape, for his life. He closed his eyes behind the mask, his breath hitching, fighting back a wave of pun-induced nausea that threatened to overwhelm him. It's always there. The storm, his thoughts were raw, unbidden, a whisper of the boy beneath the mask. Never really ends. Just goes quiet for a while. He gritted his teeth, the muscles in his jaw aching, and forced himself to stand straight, to push the pain back down into the box where he kept all the other broken things. Weakness was a luxury he could not afford. Not in front of his men. Not in front of anyone. Boar appeared at the edge of his vision. "Intel secured, Captain. Standard mercenary contracts. Nothing of value." The man held out a small, waterproof scroll. Wolf took it without a word, tucking it into a sealed pouch on his belt. He raised his hand again, a new signal: mission complete. Return to base. He didn't look back at the bodies. He didn't look back at the rain-swept patch of forest where 4 men had just ceased to exist. It was already in the past, another sterile entry in a mission log. He turned and melted back into the forest, his squad falling into formation behind him, their 3 figures dissolving like ghosts into the rain and the encroaching night. He was a ghost, haunted not by the men he killed, but by the boy he had been forced to bury deep within himself, beneath layers of scarred tissue, cold duty, and the blank white face of a wolf. The journey back was a silent gray affair. The rain eventually ceased, but the damp chill clung to Wolf's armor like a second skin. With every league closer to Konoha's walls, the cold persona of the Anbu captain felt heavier, the mask more constricting. He was returning to a place of warmth and light, a home he was tasked with protecting, yet he carried the forest's cold, wet darkness within him. The transition was never easy, but this time, it felt impossible. The next morning, he was expected to exist in the sanctuary of light and order that was the Hokage's office. The room was a world away, smelling of old paper, ink, and the faint, clean scent of the polished wood of the great desk. It was the scent of power, of history, of peace. A peace he had just killed to protect. Sunlight, bright and sharp, streamed through the massive paned window that overlooked the village, illuminating a billion dust motes dancing in the warm, still air. Minato Namikaze stood by the window, not looking out at the village, but at the small family unit gathered near his desk. Kushina was unpacking a bento box, her vibrant red hair a splash of defiant color in the otherwise formal room, her laughter a sound that felt both achingly familiar and impossibly distant. Miss Yumi, now 8 years old and a whirlwind of energy, was trying to show her father a drawing, her lilac eyes wide with excitement. It was a sun-drenched portrait of domestic Lifia seen from a world to which he no longer belonged. The heavy oak door opened without a knock. The laughter died. Kushina's smile froze, her hands stilling over the neatly arranged rice balls. Miss Yumi, mid-sentence, went quiet, her bubbly energy evaporating as if it had never been. She took a half-step back, her small hand instinctively finding the fabric of her mother's dress. Naruto stepped inside. He had shed the mud and blood-stained armor of the wolf. He now wore a simple dark high-collared jonin uniform, stark and unadorned. His boots made no sound on the polished floor. His gaze was a physical thing, a straight, unwavering line that fixed on the center of the Hokage's desk, deliberately cutting past his mother and sister, as if they were nothing more than furniture. He stopped exactly 5 paces from the desk, his body snapping to a ramrod straight position of attention. Anbu Captain Wolf, reporting as ordered, Hokage-sama. The silence that followed was a physical weight. The dust motes continued their dance in the sunbeams, oblivious to the fact that the very air in the room had turned to glass, fragile and ready to shatter. Kushina's face was a mask of confusion and a deep maternal hurt. She looked from the cold stranger wearing her son's face to her husband, a silent pleading question in her eyes. Leonardo's expression was heavy with a sorrow that seemed to age him in an instant. He moved back behind his desk, the broad wooden surface becoming a barrier between them. He picked up a pen, a futile gesture of normalcy. "Report, Captain," he said, his voice the calm, measured tone of the Hokage, a tone that was a betrayal to the father. Naruto delivered the report. His voice was a flat, dispassionate monotone, stripped of all inflection, all life. Mission objective completed at 2200 hours. Targets neutralized. Mercenary cell, confirmed. Intel retrieved was negligible. He stepped forward, placed a single, sealed scroll on the edge of the great desk, and stepped back, his movements as precise and inhuman as a puppet's. Kushina watched him, and her heart felt like it was breaking. She could see the rigid tension in his shoulders, the unnatural stillness of his posture. This wasn't the disciplined focus of a talented shinobi, it was the cold, hollow shell of something else. This wasn't her Sachi. This was a ghost. She forced a bright, trembling smile onto her face. "Naruto, that's enough duty for one day. Your father can read that later. Come, have lunch with us." She gestured to the open bento box, a peace offering. "I made your favorite." For the first time since entering the room, Naruto's gaze shifted. It moved from the desk, past his father, and for a fleeting, agonizing moment, his blue eyes met Misumi's. Misumi flinched as if he had struck her. It was a small, sharp intake of breath, a reflexive tightening of her hand on her mother's dress. She didn't just recoil, she physically hid, pressing herself against Kushina's leg, her wide lilac eyes now filled with a stark, unmistakable terror. From deep within the girl, a feeling emanated not a sound, but a palpable vibration of pure primal hostility. A whisper in the soul, not her own, but ancient and vast danger. The Kyuubi, the beast that lived within her, was looking out through her eyes, and it was looking at a monster. Naruto felt the blow land. It was a physical stab of pain deep in his chest, sharp and brutal, worse than the dull chronic ache from his ravaged body. "She's afraid of me. My own sister. She's afraid of me." He had expected it, planned for it even, but the reality was a unique and exquisite form of torture. He felt his own mask of indifference crack, and it took every ounce of his will to weld it back into place, to not let the utter devastation show on his face. From Misumi's perspective, the boy who looked like her brother was wrong. The warm, bright sun of his chakra that she remembered from her earliest childhood was gone. In its place was a void, a block of ice that felt sharp, cold, and utterly empty. It was the chakra of a killer, and the ancient, hateful being inside her screamed at its presence. Kushina was stunned, completely blindsided by the raw fear on her daughter's face. "Misumi-chan. What's wrong? It's your Narini." She looked from her terrified daughter to her stone-faced son, her voice laced with a desperate pleading confusion. "Naruto, say something. Please." He had to choose. In that half-second of silence, he could have smiled. He could have softened his voice, could have tried to bridge the terrifying chasm that had just opened between them. But he saw the fear in Misumi's eyes, and he saw the path forward. His duty was not to comfort them. His duty was to protect them. The only way to protect them was to become the monster his sister already saw. His expression, if possible, hardened further. "I am on duty," he said, his voice flat and cold. "I don't have time for lunch." The words were a slap in the face to Kushina, a confirmation of the monster for Misumi. He turned his gaze back to his father, completely and cruelly dismissing the two women he loved more than life itself. "If there are no further orders, Hokage-sama, I request permission to be dismissed." Leonardo's face was a mask of profound, helpless sorrow. He saw the entire agonizing performance for what it was. He saw the genuine terror in Misumi's eyes and understood with a sickening certainty that this was not just a phase. This was a wound, deep and festering, and he didn't know how to heal it. But he was the Hokage, and this was the role his son had chosen to play. He had no choice but to be a part of the terrible theater. His voice was heavy, drained of all emotion, a perfect mirror of Naruto's. "Dismissed, Captain." Naruto turned on his heel. He did not look back. He walked out of the office, his back ramrod straight, each step an act of supreme self-control. The heavy oak door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the silent room like a cell door locking. In the space Naruto had just vacated, his family remained, a portrait of fractured stillness. Kushina, her eyes shining with unshed tears, knelt to wrap her arms around her trembling daughter, who buried her face in her mother's dress. And Minato, the yellow flash, the most powerful man in the village, sat behind his great desk and looked utterly, completely helpless as he stared at the door that had just closed on his son. The sunlight streaming through the window no longer felt warm, but cold and accusing, illuminating a family portrait that had just been irrevocably broken. He didn't register the path he took, his feet carrying him through shadowed alleyways on autopilot. The echo of Izumi's whisper, "Where did he go?" Naruto was a fresh wound, far sharper than the chronic ache in his gut. Every step away from her felt like a betrayal, yet every step was a necessary sacrifice. By the time he reached the hidden entrance to the bunker, the boy who had just broken his best friend's heart was gone, buried once more beneath the cold stone of the captain. There was only the mission now. There could only ever be the mission. The bridge was small, an unadorned arch of dark, splintery wood over a quiet, shallow creek in a secluded corner of Konoha. It was their place. A place of shared secrets and scraped knees, of whispered dreams under summer stars. Tonight, it was a stage for a lie. The sun had long since bled out below the horizon, leaving the sky a deep bruised purple, the first few stars glittering like chips of ice in the vast emptiness. The air was cool, carrying the clean, damp scent of river water and stone. A single distant paper lantern swayed in a faint breeze, casting long, distorted shadows that danced on the gurgling water like grasping fingers. She was already there. Izumi sat on the edge of the bridge, her legs dangling just inches above the creek's gentle current. She wasn't looking at the water, but at her own hands, twisting a loose thread on the cuff of her training tunic. He could feel her presence from 50 yards away, a familiar warmth that was now a source of profound, aching pain. He had hoped for a foolish, selfish moment, that she wouldn't have come, that she would have finally given up. But he knew her better than that. Her loyalty was as fierce and unwavering as his own. He emerged from the shadows at the end of the bridge, his movements deliberately slow, stripped of the vibrant energy she would recognize. He stopped a good 10 feet away from her, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, a physical barrier erected between them before a single word was spoken. She looked up, and for a moment, a flicker of hopeful relief crossed her face. It died the instant she saw his expression. The boy who arrived was not the one she had been waiting for. "I went to your apartment," she said, her voice quiet but carrying clearly in the evening stillness. "Your mom said you were on a mission. She said you've been on a lot of missions lately." She stood, her movements graceful but heavy with a weariness that didn't belong on a girl her age. She took a step closer, her dark eyes searching his, pleading. "You missed my final academy sparring match today. You promised you'd be there." He kept his face a blank canvas, a perfect imitation of the emotionless Anbu he had just been. "Something came up," he said, his voice flat, sterile. "Missions take priority." Liar, the word screamed in his mind. He remembered the promise vividly. He had a clone prepped and ready, hidden just outside the academy grounds. But then Shisui's urgent summons had come, the final terrible pieces of the coup plot clicking into place. The clone had been dismissed without a second thought. Duty had consumed everything. "I'm sorry, Izumi. I'm so sorry." He crushed the apology before it could reach his eyes. Izumi took another step, a sad, knowing half-smile touching her lips. It was a smile that broke his heart. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't do that. Not with me." She was closer now, close enough for him to see the dark circles under her eyes, the faint trembling of her lower lip. "Don't give me the Anbu captain voice. Don't lie to me." Her gaze intensified, and it felt as if she were looking right through his ribs, past the armor of his uniform, and into the hollow space where his soul used to be. "I can feel it, Naruto. It's like a wall of ice around you. Every word you say to me now is a lie. I've been your best friend since we were little. I know the sound of your breathing when you sleep. I know the way your eyes twitch just before you're about to pull a prank. I know the difference between the truth and a lie." Her words were not an accusation, they were a statement of fact, a testament to the bond he was now tasked with destroying. And it hurt. It hurt with a white-hot agony that made the chronic pain in his body feel like a dull, distant ache. She was right. She saw right through him, and his only recourse was to become even crueler, to build the wall higher. The cold, dismissive sigh escaped his lips. He let it hang in the air between them, a poison. "Maybe you're right," he said, finally meeting her gaze, his own eyes deliberately empty, a reflection of the bruised, stardusted sky. "Maybe it is all a lie." He watched a hurt flash in her eyes, a visible physical blow. He felt a perverse sense of victory, immediately followed by a wave of self-loathing so profound it almost made him sick. "Good. It's working. Don't stop now. Break it. Break it all so she can't follow you down into the dark." "Maybe," he continued, his voice a blade he was twisting in her heart, "you never knew me at all." "No," she shook her head, her voice trembling, denial warring with the cold evidence before her. "No, the boy I know wouldn't be so cold." The mention of Miss Yumi was another stab of pain. "This is why. This is exactly why. The boy you know is gone," he said, the words tasting like ash. He was weak. He was sentimental. He took a step towards her, and she instinctively took one back, her trust finally beginning to fray. She looked at him, her face a portrait of utter, heartbreaking confusion. The anger she should have felt was absent, replaced by a deep, searching sorrow. Her voice was a choked whisper, the last desperate plea of a drowning girl. "What happened to you?" The boy who sat on this very bridge and promised we'd share everything, the boy who held my hand during the Kyuubi attack and promised to protect my smile, where did he go, Naruto? He had to end it. Now. He turned his back on her, a final unforgivable act of cowardice, and stared out at the dark flowing water. His reflection stared back, a monster with his face, its expression one of pure silent agony that she could not be allowed to see. But his voice, when he spoke, was the coldest, cruelest thing she had ever heard. He grew up. He let the words hang there, a death sentence for their friendship. You should try it sometime. He didn't wait for her response. He didn't dare look at her face. He simply walked away, his step steady as he melted back into the shadows, leaving her alone on the bridge, the single lantern casting a lonely, wavering light on her frozen form. For a long time, Izumi didn't move. The chill of the night seeped into her bones, but it was nothing compared to the ice that was spreading through her chest. Finally, a single hot tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek, falling silently from her chin to be swallowed by the dark, indifferent waters of the creek below. The echo of their friendship had faded, replaced by the chilling, absolute silence of his final, unforgivable lie. The heavy, reinforced door of the safe house ground shut with a sound of finality, a groan of stressed metal that echoed in the small, stone chamber. The world was plunged into an absolute, disorienting blackness, a silence so profound it felt like being submerged in deep water. A moment later, a flint scraped against steel. A spark flared, and a single thick candle wick caught, blooming into a small, steady flame. The light pushed back the oppressive darkness, but only just, revealing a Spartan forgotten place, a tomb of secrets buried deep within the village's foundations. The air was cold and stale, heavy with the scent of damp stone, old paper, and the faint metallic tang of whetstones. The candlelight painted flickering, monstrous shadows on the bare, weeping walls. In the center of the room, a hand appeared in the warm glow. Naruto pulled off his white wolf mask, the porcelain cool against his skin, and placed it carefully on the low wooden table. The face he revealed was not the cold captain or the cruel stranger from the bridge. It was the face of a tired, emotionally raw 13-year-old boy, his blue eyes haunted, reflecting the tiny, dancing flame. You saw her. The voice came from the deeper shadows, and a figure detached itself from the gloom. Shisui Uchiha was already there, his own crow mask held loosely in one hand. He was dressed in a simple dark amber-style uniform, stripped of all clan insignia. He moved into the candlelight, his expression grim and weary. He pushed a dented tin cup of cool water across the rough surface of the table towards Naruto. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact, an acknowledgement of a shared painful duty. Naruto didn't answer. He slumped into the hard wooden chair opposite his friend, the sound of his gear creaking in the silence. He ran a trembling hand through his blonde hair, the gesture ragged with an exhaustion that went far beyond the physical. The answer was written all over his face. He had done what he had to do. He had twisted the knife. She'll hate me now, he thought, the idea a fresh bleeding wound. Good. That's the point. Hate is a shield. It will keep her safe. It will keep her away from this. He repeated the words like a mantra, a desperate piece of logic against a tidal wave of guilt and regret. This bunker was their only sanctuary, and it was also their prison. Only here, in this cold, forgotten place, could they lower their masks. But the faces they revealed were those of two young men drowning under the weight of a world-ending secret. Shisui's empathy for Naruto's personal pain was real, a shadow of concern in his dark eyes, but it was a luxury neither of them could afford to dwell on. Shisui unrolled a long scroll across the table, its edges worn and frayed. It was a list of names, meticulously written, all belonging to respected members of the Uchiha clan. The list of dissenters is growing, Shisui said, his voice a low, tense murmur that was barely more than a whisper. And the rhetoric is getting worse. They're talking openly about the humiliation of the clan, about taking what is rightfully theirs by force. He tapped a name near the top of the list, his finger tracing the kanji for Yashiro. Yashiro. He accused the Hokage of intentionally weakening the police force during a clan meeting yesterday. He called it a calculated insult. Shisui looked up, his gaze intense. No one silenced him, Naruto. Not a single elder. They just listened. Naruto leaned forward, his personal pain receding, replaced by the cold, sharp focus of the captain. He pushed the cup of water aside and pulled out his own, smaller scroll, placing it next to Shisui's. And this is the new route patrol schedule Danza-sama just assigned for the next 7 to 12 hours. He unrolled it, revealing a complex grid of timings and routes. It creates a 12-hour blind spot along the northern wall every night, from Ahanahindered to Othrahindered. The same sector as the Uchiha compound. They both stared at the two scrolls lying side by side in the candlelight. The Uchiha mobilization roster and the route operational schedule. Two halves of a single, monstrous plan. The coordinated strike, Shisui breathed, the last vestiges of hope draining from his voice. No doubt left. The candle flame flickered, casting their shadows long and gaunt against the stone wall. They were just two boys, hunched over a table in the dark, staring at the blueprint for a civil war. Naruto's mind raced, connecting the terrible dots. So, the Uchiha police force uses their authority to secure key civilian areas and neutralize the Jonin on patrol. They create chaos, a distraction. And in that confusion, Shisui continued, his voice hollow, Danzo's root teams, under the guise of an emergency stabilization force, will strike the Hokage Tower and the council chambers. They'll assassinate Minato-sama and the elders. The Uchiha will be blamed for starting the fire, Naruto finished, the words tasting like poison. And Danzo will be hailed as the hero who put it out, seizing control with the support of the frightened elders and what's left of the council. He'll have his war with Kumo, and he'll be in charge of it. They were no longer just shinobi analyzing a plan. They were a son forced to articulate the impending murder of his own father and another forced to articulate the self-destruction of his entire family. Saying the words out loud, here in the suffocating silence of the bunker, gave the nightmare a terrifying weight. Damn it. Naruto slammed a fist on the table, the wood groaning in protest, the candle flame jumping violently. We've been trying to stop this for months. Spreading counter-rumors, arranging for the more moderate shinobi to lead key patrols, feeding Danzo false intel about the Uchiha's readiness, none of it worked. It's like every time we put out a spark, someone behind us is pouring oil on it. Because they were, Shisui said, his voice weary beyond his years. He activated his Sharingan, the three tomo spinning slowly in the dim light, a sign of his immense distress. It's not him, Naruto. It can't be. The words were a desperate final denial. I remember Fugaki-sama, he was stern, he was proud, but he was always loyal to the village. He was proud of you. He would never sanction this. The man leading those meetings, he looks like my clan head, his chakra signature is a near-perfect match, but it feels wrong. Colder. Empty. Naruto nodded grimly, the pieces finally clicking into a horrifying picture. I know. The reports I file for Danzo are designed to make my father look weak. The reports I file for my father show Danzo consolidating power. And the reports I used to give to Fugaku-sensei all the intel we've been feeding him to try and calm him down, what if it's all been going to the wrong person? The unthinkable truth settled between them, cold and heavy as a tombstone. The man they had been trying to influence, to de-escalate, was the one fanning the flames. Their enemy wasn't just in front of them, he was wearing the face of a friend, a leader, a father. Shisui leaned back, the weight of the revelation seeming to crush him. So we can't just expose the coup. If we tell the clan their leader is a fake without absolute proof, they'll call it a lie from the Hokage's office. It would trigger the coup immediately. If we tell the Hokage, he'll be forced to act against the entire Uchiha clan to root out the impostor, and a civil war will start anyway. And Danzo will use the chaos to make his move, Naruto finished, his voice hollow. He looked at Shisui, his blue eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight, looking far older than his 13 years. We're trapped. Every single path leads to war. Their intelligence, their unique positions, their desperate efforts, it had all led them to a cage with no exit. The candle flame guttered, casting their faces in shifting light and shadow. Shisui's gaze drifted to his own reflection in the polished surface of his tento lying on the table. He saw his own eyes staring back at him, the intricate deadly pattern of his Manjukam Sharingan. He took a deep, steadying breath. There is one last resort, he said softly. My Kodamatsukami. It rewrites a person's will without them ever knowing. I can force the impostor to call off the coup. Naruto looked at his friend, at the terrible, self-sacrificial resolve hardening his features. It's a one-shot weapon, Shisui. It could be years before you can use it again. And you have no idea who or what you're up against. I know, Shisui said, his voice quiet but firm. But it's the only card we have left to play. It's the only path that doesn't end with our home burning. They locked eyes across the table, the unspoken understanding passing between them. Naruto gave a slow, solemn nod. I'll create a diversion near the Naka River. I'll draw away the main patrols myself. It'll give you a clean entry. Their hands met over the map of their village, clasping arms in a silent pact. Two boys, alone in the dark, were about to launch their own secret desperate mission to save their world. They were two small, flickering flames, preparing to stand against a coming tidal wave of darkness, completely unaware that their enemies had not only seen them coming, but had been waiting for them all along. Deep beneath Konoha, in a place that did not officially exist, the air itself was a prisoner. It was stale, cold, and utterly still, carrying the faint, sterile scent of old stone and something vaguely metallic and antiseptic, like a forgotten infirmary. This was the central chamber of Root headquarters, a perfect cube of black, seamless stone, a place designed to crush the spirit and muffle screams. There was only a single, Spartan desk, a hardback chair, and a single thick candle whose flame burned with a steady, unnatural stillness in the dead air. Danzo Shimura sat behind the desk, a living statue carved from shadow. The candlelight caught the hard line of his jaw and glinted in his single, exposed eye, an eye that was sharp, analytical, and as devoid of warmth as a shard of obsidian. He was not waiting. He was simply present. The air in the center of the room shimmered, tearing reality itself. The space warped and twisted into a swirling vortex that seemed to pull the very light and sound of the room into its abyss. From this vortex, a figure stepped forth. He wore the face of Fugaku Uchiha. The man stood before the desk, perfectly emulating the Uchiha clan head's proud, stern posture. But there was an underlying stillness to him, a predatory patience that the real Fugaku had never possessed. Danzo did not flinch. This was a prearranged meeting of monsters. The pieces are in place, Danzo stated, his voice a dry rasp, like stones grinding together. My men are prepared. The Hokage's guard is compromised. The man wearing Fugaku's face gave a curt nod, his voice a perfect imitation of the clan head's timbre, but laced with an undercurrent of something cold and hollow. As is the clan. My most loyal lieutenants will lead the strike on the Hokage Tower at the height of the chaos. They wait only my final command. The words hung in the dead air, a blueprint for treason. And our agreement holds? Danzo asked, his single eye narrowing. Once Minato is eliminated, you will support my claim as interim Hokage to restore order. The Uchiha clan honors its agreements, the impostor replied smoothly. You will have your seat, Danzo. All we ask in return is our rightful place, free from the Senju's shadow. The silent predatory negotiation passed between them in the flickering candlelight. Fool, Danzo thought, his mind a cold, precise machine. Your ambition has blinded you. The moment Minato falls, your entire clan will be branded traitors. I will have you all purged in the name of the very order you helped me create. The Sharingan will belong to me, and Konoha will finally have the strength it has lacked. Old man Obito thought, looking through Fugaku's eyes. You covet a chair, well I am building a new world from the ashes of this one. Your ambition is a useful tool, a hammer to shatter the foundations. You will be consumed by the very chaos you seek to command. All that matters is the boy. Two master manipulators, each believing he was the one holding the strings. There is one final matter, the impostor said, his tone becoming sharper, a hint of the true obsessive voice bleeding through the facade. The Hokage's son. The Anbu, wolf. Danzo's expression remained impassive, but a flicker of genuine interest shone in his eye. A talented but unstable asset. What of him? During the chaos, I want him captured, the impostor commanded. Unharmed, if possible. My clan has a special interest in his unique eyes. He is a stain on the Uchiha bloodline that must be properly managed. The lie was elegant, playing perfectly to what Danzo would believe about the Uchiha's arrogance. It was the perfect cover for his true, singular goal. Danzo considered this. He is a dangerous variable, he stated. Loyal to Minato, and his power it is unpredictable. The impostor allowed a cold, humorless smirk to touch Fugaku's turned lips. Which is why my clan is best suited to handle him. Leave him to us. Danzo gave a slow, deliberate nod. Very well. He is a loose end. A loose end with a powerful and useful Dojutsu. Consider him yours. The night of the full moon, then, the impostor said, the pact sealed. He turned, and the air around him began to warp, dissolving back into the swirling vortex of Kamui before vanishing. Danzo remained seated, a faint cruel smile touching his lips. He was so lost in his triumph that he did not notice the subtle shift in the wall behind him. A hidden player in this terrible game had been watching all along. From the seamless black stone, a grotesque half-white, half-black face emerged. Zetsu, a creature of shadow and secrets, looked upon the scene, a manic knowing grin stretched across the white half of his face. He sank back into the wall, his presence dissolving, his whispered thoughts the only proof of his existence. Haha, what a delicious play. The white half's voice was a gleeful, nasally hiss in the void. The old war hawk and the proud Uchiha both dancing on Madara-sama's strings. So much fun. They are insects, the black half's voice replied, cold, ancient, and utterly devoid of emotion. And poor little Naruto. The special prize. Everyone wants a piece of him. I wonder who will get to him first. It doesn't matter, the black half stated. Everything proceeds as planned. The Uchiha will destroy themselves. Danzo will weaken the village from within. And the boy will be broken. It doesn't matter who wins this pathetic struggle for a chair. In the end we are the only ones who benefit. Zetsu's presence faded completely. The chamber was silent once more, the single candle flame continuing its steady, lonely vigil. It illuminated a room where a village's fate had just been sealed by men who saw it as nothing more than a game, completely unaware that they, too, were merely pawns on a much older, much more terrifying board. The silence in the bunker deepened, now thick with the weight of their impossible choice. The single candle flame, their only witness, cast long, wavering shadows that danced like specters on the cold stone walls. Shisui clenched his fist on the tabletop, the leather of his glove creaking under the strain. My Kodomatsukami will work, he said, his voice a low, intense whisper, as if convincing himself as much as Naruto. It has to. I will end this. Naruto let out a short, hollow breath. It was not a laugh, but the sound of hope being finally and completely expelled from his lungs. He didn't answer immediately. His gaze fell to the white wolf mask resting on the table. He reached out and picked it up, his thumb tracing the cold, emotionless features carved into the porcelain. Your Jinjutsu is for one man, Shisui, he said quietly, his voice a near inaudible murmur, his eyes still fixed on the mask. He felt the phantom weight of it on his face, the comfort of its anonymity, the curse of its necessity. But this disease has spread too far. It has festered in the dark for too long. He looked up, and the solitary candle flame was reflected in his tired eyes. They held no hope, only a terrible clarity. A sickness like this, he continued, his voice hardening, each word dropping into the silence like a stone into a deep well, needs to be cut out at the root. He finally met Shisui's gaze, a direct, unwavering look that held the full crushing weight of his own grim resolve. So pray your miracle works, my friend. He stood, placing the wolf mask back over his face. The boy vanished completely, replaced by the cold, efficient specter of the Anbu captain. Because my solution is ready. And it is not a miracle. It is an ending. The full moon was a cold, silver eye in the starless black of the sky. It bleached a world of color, painting the sleeping Uchiha district in stark monochromatic shades. The silence was a liar, it was not the peace of a slumbering village, but the heavy, watchful quiet of a predator holding its breath. Every shadow seemed to stretch, to deepen, to hide something with teeth. The pair of shinobi sandals landed on the dark roof tiles of the main house without a sound. Shisui Uchiha was a silhouette against the moon, a ghost made of night and grim resolve. He flowed across the rooftop, his movements a fluid dance of shadow, more specter than boy. The diversion Naruto had created near the Naka River, a series of small, precisely timed fires and chakra flourished, drawn the main patrols away, leaving the heart of the compound unnervingly still. It had worked perfectly. Too perfectly. A knot of dread, cold and tight, formed in his stomach. He reached the edge of the roof and descended the wall like a drop of ink, moving towards the study. A single, soft light burned within, filtering through the delicate paper of the shoji screen, a lonely beacon in the oppressive dark. He's in there, Shisui thought, his heart hammering against his ribs. The impostor. Meditating. He had watched a routine for weeks, a constant, unvarying pattern. This was it. The single, fragile moment upon which the fate of his clan, his village, and his best friend rested. He took a deep, steadying breath and called upon the technique that had earned him his name. He dissolved, becoming a flicker, a whisper of displaced air, a murder of intangible crows that passed through the slight gap in the veranda's sliding door. He reformed inside, as silent as a prayer in a forgotten shrine. The room was spare, the air thick with the scent of old wood and incense. In the center, seated in a perfect Seiza pose, was the man who wore the face of Fugaku Uchiha. His back was to the veranda. He did not move. The lantern on a low table cast his long, imposing shadow across the tatami mats, a slash of deeper darkness in the gloom. Shisui's focus was absolute. This was his only chance. I was wondering when you would finally make your move, Shisui. The voice was a perfect imitation of his clan head's deep timbre, but it was laced with a chilling, mocking amusement that made the hairs on Shisui's neck stand on end. He hadn't even turned around. Shisui froze, his blood turning to ice. The trap was sprung. The infiltration, the surprisal of it, a child's fantasy. He hadn't been the hunter. He had been a mouse, walking calmly into the serpent's maw. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but years of Uchiha discipline slammed a wall down on the fear. He activated his Manjukam Sharingan, the world sharpening into terrifying clarity. Fugaku-sama, he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline roaring in his ears. You have been deceived. For the sake of the clan, you must listen. Deceived? The man wearing Fugaku's face slowly rose to his feet. He turned, and the cruel, unfamiliar smirk on his lips was a grotesque violation of his mentor's stern features. No. I believe it is you who has been deceived. Before Shisui could channel the chakra for his ultimate technique, the impostor's right eye transformed. A blue-dot iris, 3 tomo spinning into existence. From that single, terrible eye, an immense warping power emanated, a pressure that felt like the very fabric of space was collapsing in on itself. This was not just an impostor. This was a monster. Shisui ignored the primal scream in his soul telling him to run. He poured his will, his life, his everything into his left eye. Kodomatsukami. He commanded silently, a spear of irresistible influence aimed at the impostor's very core. Cease the coup. Protect Konoha. The impostor stood there, his cold smirk unwavering. Then, he chuckled, a low, hollow sound. A magnificent technique, the man said, his voice a perfect copy of Fugaku's. The power to manipulate without awareness. A true treasure. He took a step forward, completely, utterly unaffected. But it is useless against Kamui. The world broke. The tatami mats, the paper screens, the flickering lantern, they all began to twist into a nauseating, silent vortex centered on the impostor's single, spinning red eye. Shisui felt a terrifying, irresistible pull, as if his very soul were being unspooled and dragged into that swirling abyss. His ultimate genjutsu had not just failed, it had been contemptuously dismissed. The hope he and Naruto had guarded in the dark was extinguished. There was no peaceful solution. He could not win. He could only escape. He had to warn Naruto. He poured every last, screaming ounce of his remaining chakra into the body flicker technique. As he dissolved, he felt a searing, white-hot pain in his right eye, a feeling of icy fingers trying to pluck it from his skull as the impostor lunged. He broke free, but it was not a clean escape. He was blasted backwards out of the house in a chaotic, uncontrolled burst, crashing through the veranda and into the stone garden wall, with a sickening crunch of bone and splintering wood. He lay in the rubble, the world a blurry, spinning nightmare through his one good eye. His right eye was a ruin of agony, blind and useless. He had failed the village. He had failed Naruto. Inside the study, Obito, still wearing Fugaku's face, lowered his hand. He had missed his prize, but it didn't matter. A cold, knowing smirk touched his lips as he watched Shisui's broken form flee into the night. So it begins, he thought, his gaze distant, looking past the coming massacre, towards a red moon and a world of dreams. The fall of the Uchiha, the ambition of Danzathi were not the goals. They were merely the first heavy dominoes, finally set to fall. Shisui forced himself to move. Pain was a fire in his side, in his head, in his ruined eye. He stumbled to his feet, a broken Oni crow, and began his final, desperate flight, unaware that he was not escaping, but being herded, a wounded animal, directly into the final, waiting trap. The clearing was a cage, and Naruto knew it the moment he arrived. He stood in a small, circular patch of earth where the trees grew thick and old, their branches devouring the moonlight. The air was still and cold, heavy with an unnatural quiet. To the west, the faint orange glow of his diversion pulsed against the clouds. He should be here, Naruto's mind raced, his Sharingan a low thrum of power behind his mask. The diversion won't hold forever. Where is he? He heard it before he saw it, clumsy, desperate sound of someone crashing through the undergrowth. Not a shinobi. A winded animal. Shisui burst into the clearing, a broken shadow in the fractured moonlight. He was stumbling, one hand clamped over the right side of his face, his uniform torn and stained. Naruto. He gasped, his voice a hoarse rasp. He saw the waiting figure of Wolf, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of hope crossed his face. The forest exploded. From the pitch-black canopy, a dozen figures flowed down like spiders on silk threads, landing in a perfect, synchronized circle. The moonlight glinted off the faint, sickly purple sheen of poison on their drawn tantos. The relief was brutally shattered. They weren't fooled, Naruto realized with a certainty so cold it burned. They ignored the diversion. They were waiting. They used him as bait. Danzo. He snarled, the name a curse as he drew his blade and moved to Shisui's side, shielding his friend's wounded flank. The root agents did not speak. They attacked as one. The fight was a whirlwind. Naruto and Shisui, even with Shisui half-blind, fought back-to-back in a blur of motion. Their blades were extensions of their will, a desperate, brilliant synergy born of a lifetime of friendship. But they were a relentless machine. This wasn't a battle. It was an extermination. They're too coordinated, Naruto's tactical mind screamed. A graze is all they need. His eyes darted to the edge of the clearing. The police force, they should have heard a real battle. A new colder dread seeped into him. Unless the impostor ordered them to stand down. Unless they're letting this happen. The thought was a distraction that almost cost him everything. An agent's blade slid past his guard, slicing a shallow, burning line across his arm. The poison was instant, a fire that began to deaden his nerves. Shisui, overcompensating for his blind side, left a fractional opening. A root agent with a blank mask exploited it perfectly, his tanto flashing in a silent arc aimed at Shisui's exposed back. Naruto saw it. Shisui. He yelled, pushing his damaged body past its limits. He was not going to be fast enough. But Shisui heard his cry. He saw Naruto's desperate lunge to save him. And in that same instant, he saw another agent moving to intercept Naruto, blade aimed at the boy's throat. He made a choice. Instead of trying to dodge, he used his last, explosive burst of chakra not to escape, but to deliberately throw himself backwards, into Naruto's path. He shielded his friend with his own body. And in doing so, he took the agent's poison tanto deep into his side. Time seemed to congeal. The sound of the blade sinking into flesh was a sickening, wet thud. Naruto's lunge ended with him catching his friend, his brother, as he collapsed. The root agents, their primary target neutralized, pulled back, their objective complete, reforming their silent, implacable circle. No, Naruto whispered, lowering the collapsing Shisui to the cold earth. No, no, Shisui. The poison was fast-acting. Shisui coughed, a spray of dark blood staining his lips. He looked up at Naruto's horrified face, visible through the eye slits of the wolf mask, and managed a faint, heartbreaking smile. "Looks like this is it for me, Naruto." He reached up, gripping Naruto's arm with a desperate strength. His gaze was intense, boring into Naruto's very soul. "Protect the peace," he gasped, his voice a ghost. "Protect the village and do what you must." The light in his eyes flickered. And then, it was gone. Naruto knelt there, holding the body of his best friend. The grief was a physical thing, a black hole that opened in his chest, consuming everything. It acted as a key, turning a lock deep within his soul. His Sharingan spun, the three crimson tomo blurring, bleeding together, reforming into a new terrifying geometry, a complex three-bladed crimson shuriken, its points cruelly curved like a wolf's claws. A single bloody tear, born of this agonizing evolution, traced a path from one eye slit of his mask, a stark crimson line against the white. The boy who had knelt there was dead. The monster was all that was left. The grief was a physical thing, a black hole that had opened in his chest, consuming everything: sound, light, hope. Shisui was gone. His friend, his brother, his only ally in this silent, suffocating war, was a cooling body in his arms. The world had ceased to hold meaning. All that remained was the finality of his failure and the patient, tightening circle of white-masked assassins. Their presence was an insult. Their continued existence was a desecration. The bloody tear that traced a path down his mask felt hot, then cold. The world, viewed through his new terrible eyes, sharpened into a crystalline crimson clarity. The silence was a desecration that would not be allowed to stand. It rushed in to fill the space where Shisui's last breath had been, a profound, hollow void that was more horrifying than any sound. The root assassins, their mission complete, began to advance. Their blank masks were like the faces of soulless dolls, impassive and identical in the moonlight. One of them, the agent who had struck the fatal blow, lunged forward, his poisoned tanto a silent blur, aimed at Naruto's exposed back. He was a few feet away when a whisper, more felt than heard, moved through the clearing. "Get away from him." The agent froze mid-stride, not from a physical force, but from a sudden crushing pressure that seemed to emanate from the very air, a pressure so immense it felt like the gravity of the world had doubled. The temperature in the clearing plummeted. The wind died. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. Naruto gently laid Shisui's head down on a patch of soft moss. He rose to his feet, not with the frantic energy of a cornered animal, but with a slow, deliberate, and utterly serene grace. He turned to face the circle of assassins. Behind the eye slits of his mask, his new eyes burned a three-bladed crimson shuriken of his manjicum, spinning slowly with a hypnotic deadly rhythm. And with them, came the specter. The torrent of immense chakra erupted from Naruto's body. It was not the chaotic blue of Raiden, but a deep, spectral, blooded energy that bled into the air like ink in water. First, a colossal ribsage of pure crimson force materialized around him, the bones arching high over his head like the branches of a dead, petrified tree. Even the elite Emishanstinted root agents took an involuntary step back. This was a force that did not need to be sensed. It was a physical presence, a suffocating pressure that made their lungs burn and their instincts scream. The structure grew. Vertebrae stacked upon one another, forming a massive curved spine. Skeletal arms, vast and terrible, erupted from newly formed shoulder joints. The energy solidified further, muscles of pure dark red chakra weaving themselves over the skeletal frame, followed by a final terrifying layer of armor. It was a samurai, a giant warrior clad in intricate overlapping plates of scarlet armor that seemed to drink the moonlight. From its shoulders rose high, armored pauldrons, and its helmet was a thing of pure nightmare, a perfect, monstrous replica of a wolf's skull, its empty eye sockets burning with a malevolent crimson light, its long snout tapering into a fanged, snarling maw. In its two massive armored hands, it held a pair of spectral katanas, their blades the color of polished obsidian. This was Naruto Susanoo. "You took him from me," Naruto whispered, his voice calm, serene, and utterly devoid of all human warmth. From within the chest of the armored colossus, his voice echoed, amplified into a deep, resonant and terrifying pronouncement that vibrated in the very bones of the assassins. He did not scream. He did not rage. He simply raised one of the Susanoo's massive armored hands. The slaughter that followed was not a battle, it was a judgment. The Susanoo's black katana swung in a slow, graceful, unstoppable arc. It did not just cut through the root agents, it erased them. The blade passed through three of them, and for a moment, they seemed untouched. Then, they simply fell apart into silent, bloodless pieces, their bodies and gear severed with a geometric precision that defied physics. Another agent, his training screaming at him to flee, turned and ran. He was simply backhanded by the colossal armored fist, the impact pulverizing him into a red mist that stained the ancient trees. The second black katana rose, then plunged downwards, its tip burying itself in the earth. A shockwave of pure crimson chakra erupted from the point of impact, tearing the ground asunder and vaporizing the remaining assassins in a silent, expanding wave of scarlet energy. It was over. The clearing was now a silent, smoking crater. The colossal Susanoo stood for a moment longer before it began to dissolve, the armor flaking away, the muscles unraveling, the bones fading into wisps of red smoke, until only Naruto was left standing in the center of the carnage. The backlash hit him. It was not a searing pain, but a sudden, blinding darkness. He cried out, a sharp choked gasp, and stumbled to his knees, his hands flying to his mask. A white-hot fire erupted behind his eyes, his vision dissolving into a blur of red and black. Blood, thick and hot, began to stream from his eyes, tracing paths down his cheeks from beneath his mask. It's burning the light, it's burning out, he thought, a new kind of terror piercing his grief. This immense power had a terrible, immediate price. His vision slowly, painfully, began to return, but it was like looking through a fractured, blood-smeared lens. He looked at his trembling, blood-soaked hands. He looked up at the unfeeling moon. Damn you. Damn Danzo. Damn the impostor. Damn this world. And damn every god who stood by and watched this happen. Fighting through the waves of agony, he crawled back to Shisui's body. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to save you. But the trembling hand, he performed a swift, precise, and horrifyingly intimate piece of field surgery. He carefully, reverently, removed Shisui's remaining left eye. He could not let Danzo have this power. This was not a theft, it was a sacred, terrible duty. He was taking on Shisui's burden. He placed the eye in a containment scroll and gently closed Shisui's empty eyelid. He looked down at his friend one last time. The world will say I killed you for this, he said to the body, his voice hollow. Let them. It's a better story than the truth. He forced himself to his feet, a fresh wave of dizziness washing over him. The clearing was a tomb, and he could not linger. The slaughter in the woods had only been the prelude. The true sacrifice, the one he had already accepted in the dark corners of his soul, still awaited him in the sleeping village. He turned his back on his friend's body, on the ruin he had created, and vanished into the night. The world tore itself apart in a nauseating, disjointed blur of shadow and moonlight. It was not a clean body flicker, not the silent, instantaneous shift Shisui had mastered. This was a ragged, brittle lurch through space, a desperate flight fueled by grief and borrowed power. He did not arrive in his apartment, he collapsed into it, materializing in a heap on the cold wooden floor, the world spinning violently around him. He lay there for a long moment, the hard floor a steadying anchor in a sea of pain. The air in the room was stale and familiar, his home. He pushed himself up, his arms trembling violently, and crawled towards the center of the room. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the roaring in his ears and the hammering of his own heart. He's gone. I'm alone, the thought was a hollow, melancholy echo. The reality was a physical weight, pressing down, crushing the air from his lungs. He remembered their last conversation in the bunker, the desperate hope in Shisui's eyes as he spoke of his Kodomatsukami. And he remembered his own chilling reply. Pray your miracle works, my friend. Because my solution is ready. And it is not a miracle. It is an ending. The words haunted him now. He had been ready. He had already accepted the terrible calculus. He had just prayed he would not have to do it. But slow, deliberate movements, Naruto retrieved the small, sealed scroll containing Shisui's eye. He placed it in the center of the low table with a reverence usually reserved for a sacred text. He stared at it, the simple scroll representing the totality of their shared failure and the weight of his inherited promise. Your dream, he thought, his gaze fixed on the scroll. Protect the peace. This is the only way left, Shisui. The sickness was too deep. It had to be cut out. A profound, soul-crushing sadness washed over him. This wasn't the path you wanted. But it's the one I have to walk. His trembling hands moved to a loose floorboard beneath the table. He lifted it, revealing a small, worn wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded black silk, were a handful of photographs, dog-eared and worn from countless nights spent staring at them in the dark. He pushed them aside. There was only one that mattered tonight. He picked it up, his calloused fingertips tracing the worn edges. The memory it held was a physical blow. It was the day he had finally been released from the hospital, all those years ago. He was 9 years old in the picture, thin and pale, but grinning a wide, triumphant grin. One arm was slung around a beaming Izumi. His other arm was wrapped around a tiny, giggling Misumi. Behind them, their families stood in a chaotic, happy tableau. Minato, looking like a proud father, Kushina, laughing so hard she was leaning on a smiling Makoto, the real Fugaku, a rare, small smile on his stern face, and a younger, carefree Sasuke perched on his shoulders. A single, hot tear escaped his eye and fell onto the photograph, smearing the ink of Izumi's laughing face. The promise he had made to himself that Dato never be the cause of her tears was the very thing driving him to commit an act that would give her a reason to cry for the rest of her life. Some protector I turned out to be, his thoughts were a bitter, self-loathing whisper. I'm about to become the reason you never smile again. He took a small ceramic dish and placed the photograph inside. With a single, precise application of chakra, a tiny, controlled flame bloomed at his fingertip. It was a stark contrast to the crimson all-consuming power of his Susanoo, a flame of endings, not beginnings. He touched it to the corner of the photograph. He watched, his face illuminated by the small, warm light, as his own grinning face charred and blackened. He watched Izumi's bright, laughing eyes curl and turn to ash. He watched the faces of his parents, of hers, of their siblings, dissolve into a plume of thin, grey smoke. This was a funeral. He was killing and burying the boy in the photograph. The boy who loved and was loved. He was severing his last connection to a world of hope, accepting his new identity, the kinslayer, the traitor, the monster, because the monster was the only one who could fulfill Shisui's promise. The last ember in the dish died, plunging the room back into the cold light of the moon. The warmth was gone. Naruto sat in the darkness for a long time, the silence of the room a perfect mirror of the silence in his soul. Then, with a slow, final movement, he reached for his white wolf mask. He raised it to his face, the cool porcelain a comfort against his tear-stained skin. He stood. His posture was now ramrod straight, all pain, all grief locked away behind the blank, emotionless face of the wolf. He turned and walked towards the window, a silent, grim figure ready to fulfill his terrible, self-appointed duty. The boy in the photograph was dead. The purpose was all he had left. He did not walk, he flowed. A shadow detaching from the deeper shadows of the room, he moved to the window, his form a liquid silhouette against the muted moonlight. Outside, the village breathed in its sleep, a living creature of warm lights and whispered dreams, utterly oblivious to the monster it had unwittingly created. A distant phantom ache echoed in his chest, a ghost of the love he once felt for it. He crushed the feeling with practiced efficiency. It was a weakness he could no longer afford. His path did not lie across the rooftops, in the realm of open sky and silent tiles. His path lay downwards, into the filth and secrecy the village chose to ignore. Through forgotten alleyways choked with refuse and the skeletal frames of half-finished buildings, he moved with an unnatural silence that was a presence in itself. He reached a remote sector near the old city wall, a desolate place of overgrown weeds and crumbling stone. There, he found the sewer grate, a heavy iron scar on the earth's skin. The groan of stressed metal as he lifted it was like opening a tomb. Without a backward glance, he lowered himself into the oppressive waiting blackness. Down here, the air was stale and cold, the dead breath of the village's secret heart. This was not merely an outpost, this was the true root, the festering core of Danzo's power. He had been here before, not as an infiltrator, but as a subject, chained and broken. He had been Danzo's finest, most unstable tool. Tonight, the tool had returned to dismantle its masters. His mission was absolute, a chillingly simple objective. This was not a targeted assassination. It was a purge. Danzo was the head of the serpent, but the body was the hundreds of conditioned, fanatical agents who infested this subterranean fortress. Every single one had to be erased. His first act of war was not against flesh, but against the facility's own circulatory system. He found a maintenance junction for the primary air filtration network, a nexus of humming machinery and cold steel ducts. From a sealed pouch, he retrieved a small canister. With the practiced ease of long and brutal training, he attached it to the main intake. A near-soundless hiss released a fine, colorless aerosol into the ventilation, a potent neurotoxin, designed not for a merciful death, but for a deep chemically enforced stupor. But the first domino pushed, he moved on, a ghost in a concrete labyrinth. Ahead, a two-man patrol materialized from the gloom. Predictable, his mind worked with the cold clarity of a honed weapon. A 7-minute loop. The secondary water conduit in 40 seconds is the kill zone. He descended from a ventilation shaft above, a spider dropping on a silken thread. The first agent died without knowing he was under attack, Naruto's hand clamping over his mouth as a tanto slid cleanly through his throat. The second agent spun a nanosecond too late, his gasp silenced before it could form. A single fluid motion, a soft wet sound, and the body slumped silently to the floor. He continued his silent, inexorable advance, a phantom of death in the suffocating dark. He reached the communications hub, a reinforced room guarded by 2 more agents. He didn't attack directly. He simply leaned against the outer wall, closed his eyes, and wove the genjutsu of perfect silence. Inside, the world fell away from the 2 guards. The hum of the equipment, the steady drip of a leaky pipe, the sound of their own breathing gone. An unnerving absolute void pressed in. One agent tapped his ear, his face a mask of confusion. The other stood, his hand moving towards his sidearm. It was the only distraction Naruto needed. He flickered into the room, 2 silent strikes like a whisper of steel, and they fell. He placed a single explosive tag on the central console, one designed not to detonate, but to flash fuse the delicate circuitry into a single useless lump of slag. The facility was now deaf and dumb. From there, his path led him to the main barracks, where over 100 off-duty agents slept. The aerosol had already saturated the air, pulling them into a deep, groggy state from which conscious thought was impossible. To be certain, he stood in the center of the long, dark room and wove a gentle, suffocating genjutsu, a lullaby of shadows wrapping them in a warm dream from which they would never wake. Then, the grim work began. He moved from bunk to bunk, a methodical specter of death. The hand over a mouth, the quick, silent slit of his tanto. There was no struggle, no sound, only the quiet rhythmic work of an exterminator tending to his task. The few who remained awake in the training halls were next. He used the environment as his hunting ground, the maze of pillars and sparring equipment becoming his web. He separated them, picking them off one by one with chilling creativity. A garrote wire from a darkened alcove. A poisoned senbon from the rafters. A swift, brutal takedown in a moment of distraction. Finally, he stood before the last, most heavily fortified door, the central command barracks. Behind this slab of reinforced steel, the elite of the elite were gathered, 20 operatives handpicked by Danzo to be the fangs of his coup. He placed a hand flat against the cold metal. Through his glove, he could feel the faint, disciplined hum of 20 chakra signatures, coiled and ready like snakes in a basket. This was it. There was no retreat from this threshold. He took a single, shuddering breath. In the suffocating silence before the storm, their faces came to him, unbidden and agonizingly clear. Misumi's bright, carefree laugh. His father's proud, steady smile. His mother's fierce, all-encompassing embrace. Izumi's face, etched with a heartbroken confusion he had put there himself. Shisui, his eyes full of a desperate dying trust as the world fell away beneath him. Every memory was a separate blade twisting in his soul. This was the price. He was burning down the world he cherished to protect the one they deserved to live in. Forgive me, the thought was a raw, silent scream in the hollows of his mind. He clenched his fists, the leather of his gloves creaking. The boy with a family died in that hallway, only the wolf remained. He called upon the technique he had forged in secret, a controlled cataclysm designed for a single terrible purpose. Genkai Topperake Mess HM. The low hum escalated into a deafening crackle as blue-white lightning exploded into existence, crawling over his Anbu armor like a living, sentient thing. The air in the tunnel superheated, tasting of ozone and imminent violence. The emergency seals on the walls flickered and died. He did not kick the door. He simply took a single step forward, and the wave of pure kinetic force and lightning that preceded him vaporized the reinforced steel, blasting a cloud of molten slag and superheated shrapnel into the room beyond. He became the storm. The command barracks was a concrete cage. Inside, 20 figures in identical gray flak jackets and blank masks reacted as one. They were instruments of Danzo's will, the perfect, emotionless killers. They were preparing for a battle. They were not prepared for a force of nature. For Naruto, the moment the SHM ignited, the world dissolved into a state of hyperperception. The frenetic crackle of lightning became a steady, internal hum. He moved through the still expanding cloud of his own attack, a blue-white phantom wreathed in lightning. The two agents closest to the door were still being thrown back by the concussive force. He simply passed them, and the sheer proximity of his retouched aura flash-cooked their nervous systems. They fell, inert and smoking. An agent to his left had his tanto halfway from its sheath. Naruto was already there. His hand, glowing with a light so bright it was painful to behold, phased through the man's chest plate as if it were water. The agent's body went rigid as a catastrophic amount of lightning discharged directly into his heart. Engage. Subdue. The squad leader barked, his voice a distorted slow-motion rumble in Naruto's altered perception. A futile command. There was nothing to engage. Naruto became a ricocheting bolt of lightning, a whirlwind of death that shattered their perfect coordination before it could ever form. An agent began the hand seals for a Doten wall. Naruto's lightning-worth kick caved in his sternum before the first seal was complete. Another threw a spread of poison senbon. Naruto watched them float towards him like lazy insects, sidestepped them, and was already behind the thrower, his tanto a silent blur that severed the man's spinal cord. He kicked off one wall, his boot leaving a scorched crater, and decapitated two agents in a single fluid slash. He landed and spun, his hand charged with a focused blast of lightning, slamming into another's blank mask. The porcelain and the skull beneath it exploded in a silent, contained burst. Their numbers meant nothing. Their discipline meant nothing. One agent broke. In a moment of pure instinctual panic, he turned to flee. Naruto was a flicker of static that appeared directly in his path. His hand closed around the agent's throat. There was no crushing pressure. Just a single, violent pulse of rain. The agent collapsed, a wisp of smoke curling from his open mouth. The squad leader was the last. He stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the bodies of his fallen comrades, his tanto held in a perfect defensive stance. He stared at the crackling blue-white figure walking slowly towards him. For the first time in his life, he felt a flicker of an emotion he had been trained to forget: absolute primal terror. The squad leader lunged, a final, desperate act of duty. He never reached him. A spear of pure concentrated lightning erupted from Naruto's palm, piercing the agent's chest and vaporizing a perfect circular hole through his heart, his spine, and the concrete wall behind him. The agent stood for a single, impossible moment before collapsing into a heap of smoldering armor and ash. Silence, sudden and absolute, crashed back into the room. He stood in the center of the carnage, a solitary crackling blue star in a constellation of the dead. He looked at his own hands, the lightning that wreathed them no longer a steady aura, but a furious erratic corona that spat and hissed, a visible sign of his degrading control. Each passing second was a fresh agony, another set of his own internal pathways burning away. The mission was not over. The serpent's head was still attached. Leaving the silent ruined barracks behind, he moved deeper into the heart of the dead facility. The corridor ahead was a sterile featureless tunnel of cold stone, leading to the one place more fortified than the barracks, Danzo's personal chambers. The air grew colder here, the stone seeming to absorb all light and warmth. The path was unguarded, but Naruto's Manjicum screamed a silent warning. The silence was a lie. He was being watched. He stopped before a pair of simple, unadorned iron doors. He didn't bother trying the handle. He simply raised a hand, and a controlled arc of raw lightning leaped from his fingertips, striking the lock mechanism. With a sharp crackle and a puff of acrid smoke, the lock melted into a glowing, molten ruin. He pushed the heavy doors inward. The room beyond was an ambush. From the shadows to his left and right, two figures lunged with a synchronized lethal grace. To his left was FK Yamanaka, his hands already forming the mind transfer seal, a mind-controlled puppet with metallic claws shooting forward to ensnare him. To his right was Torin Abiram, lunging with his hands bare, his skin crawling with the near-invisible shimmer of his ring-caged nano insects. It was a perfectly designed trap to subdue any foe. They had planned for a shinobi. They were not prepared for this. Insignificant was the only thought that registered. The puppet's claws were inches from his body when the lightning aura around him exploded outwards. The intricate chakra threads controlling it were instantly incinerated, and the puppet itself was blasted into 1,000 splintered, smoldering pieces. FK, caught in the edge of the blast, was thrown back against the stone wall with a sickening crunch. Torin was faster, pressing his attack. But the moment his poisoned hand entered the Raikim's field, his insects were vaporized in a burst of purple static. His entire body was seized by a catastrophic electrical charge. He went rigid, a silent scream frozen on his lips, and then collapsed, a smoking, twitching husk. Naruto hadn't even looked at him. His gaze was already locked on the recovering FK. Before the Yamanaka could attempt another jutsu, Naruto was upon him. His tanto was a blur, a single clean horizontal slash. It was over. He stepped over their bodies and entered the office proper. The room was Spartan. A single candle on a bare stone desk cast the only light. And behind it, a living statue carved from shadow, sat Danzo Shimura. He looked up, his single, exposed eye as devoid of warmth as a shard of obsidian. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "I wondered how long it would take you to dispose of my guards," Danzo said, his voice a dry rasp. "A testament to your potential." He gestured to the hardback chair opposite him. "Sit." The boy I molded would at least show the courtesy of listening to his master's final words. Naruto remained standing, the lightning around him crackling softly. "You were never my master." "No." Danzo's smile widened. "It was a bloodless, predatory thing. I gave you purpose. I showed you the truth your sentimental father was too weak to reveal. That piece is a lie. That the village's survival is the only morality. You stand there now, a kinslayer in the making, and you tell me you did not learn my lessons. You are my masterpiece, Naruto-kun. The ultimate tool, forged in the fires of loss and duty." Naruto's fury, cold and tightly controlled, surged. "I am the price for the coup you engineered." Danzo chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "A small price for a stronger Konoha." He slowly began to unwrap the bandages on his right arm, revealing the grotesque limb studded with a dozen unblinking crimson Sharingan. "You seek to kill me." A futile gesture. With that, he rose, a kunai in his left hand, wind-style vacuum blade. A thin, almost invisible blade of compressed air shot from his mouth. Naruto sidestepped it effortlessly as it gouged the iron door behind him. He lunged, his body a blur of blue-white light, his hand a spear of pure lightning that pierced Danzo's chest. Danzo looked down, then looked back up, coughing a spray of blood that sizzled against Naruto's aura. "The first is for your arrogance," he whispered, and slumped, dead. A heartbeat later, a dry chuckle echoed from behind him. Naruto spun. Danzo stood by the wall, unharmed. One of the 12 Sharingan eyes on his arm was now squeezed tightly, permanently shut. Again. Danzo attacked with a volley of vacuum bullets. Naruto danced through the ricocheting storm and closed the distance, his tanto plunging deep into Danzo's abdomen. An astute strike, Danzo grunted, before his body dissolved into inky blackness. He reformed near his desk, a second eye on his arm now closed. "The third," Danzo stated, "is for your sentimentality." He slammed his palm on the ground. Summoning jutsu. A massive elephant-like Baku materialized, its trunk aimed at Naruto. The large target. Naruto slapped a hand on the stone floor, a complex sealing array spreading from his fingertips. Uzumaki sealing art chakra suppression field. The Baku roared as the seal severed its connection to Danzo, and it vanished with a frustrated shriek. Danzo's eye widened. In that instant, Naruto was on him. A clean decapitation. The third death. Danzo reformed. Impressive Fuinjutsu. The fourth lesson is that a legacy is a burden. He attacked with a storm of kunai trailing explosive tags. Naruto's Manjukam flared, casting a Jinjutsu. In Danzo's vision, Naruto was consumed by fire. In reality, Naruto used the flash as cover, flickering to Danzo's blind spot. His lightning-charged fist caved in the back of Danzo's skull. The fourth death. The clever illusion, Danzo's voice echoed as he reformed. But you are growing tired. I can feel your chakra fluctuating. Your technique is eating you alive. The fifth lesson is the most important true power endures. He was right. Naruto's body was screaming. He needed to end this. By turn, Naruto snarled, his mind a brilliant and broken instrument solving the horrific puzzle. Not immortal. A parasite burning stolen lives. The arm is the source. Sever it. Your last lesson, old man, Naruto said, is that a cornered wolf is not a tool. It's an executioner. He knew what was coming. Danzo inhaled. Wine-style great vacuum sphere. A colossal, swirling ball of compressed wind formed before his mouth. Naruto didn't charge. He flashed through a rapid series of hand seals. Fire-style great fireball jutsu. He aimed not at Danzo, but at the ceiling directly above the sphere. The intense, superheated air slammed down, creating a catastrophic thermal reaction. The perfectly formed sphere wavered, became chaotic, and violently imploded. A shockwave tore the room apart. Danzo, caught at the center, was thrown back, his concentration shattered. It was the perfect opening. Naruto moved through the chaos, an arrow of blue-white light. He ignored Danzo's body. His blade, a shimmering arc, wasn't aiming for the head or the heart. It was aiming for the shoulder. His lightning with Tanto connected. There was a sickening sizzle of cauterized flesh, and for the first time, Danzo screamed a raw, inhuman sound of genuine shock and pain. His grotesque Sharingan-studded arm flew from his body, landing on the floor with a wet thud. Its remaining 7 eyes closed one by one like dying stars. Danzo staggered back, clutching the smoking stump of his shoulder, his face a mask of disbelief. He was now just an old, unarmed Oni man. Before he could attempt a final, desperate curse seal, Naruto was on him. His face was inches from Danzo's, the cold, dead eyes of his wolf mask staring into Danzo's single terrified eye. "The root of Konoha's darkness," Naruto whispered, his voice a dead, hollow thing. "Must be purged." His Tanto slid cleanly, finally, through Danzo's heart. The body of the man who had styled himself the darkness of the shinobi world slumped to the floor with a soft, final thud. The serpent was dead. The silence that rushed back into the chamber was absolute, a profound, hollow void. The single candle flame, which had borne silent witness, continued its lonely vigil, casting long, dancing shadows that made the dead feel as though they were still moving. The purpose that had driven him, the cold focus that had turned his grief into a weapon, was fulfilled. The adrenaline vanished. He was alone. And then the lightning died. It did not fade. The furious blue-white aura of the Reikm sputtered violently and extinguished, plunging the room into oppressive gloom. The internal hum of power ceased, and in its place, a roaring silence filled his ears. The backlash was a debt collector, arriving with brutal, immediate interest. A choked, inhuman sound tore from Naruto's throat as he stumbled, his legs refusing to hold him. He slammed against the stone wall, his entire body racked by a violent tremor. His vision dissolved into a nauseating blur, the single candle flame fracturing into a dozen dancing, accusatory stars. The pain was a fire in his nerves, as if every chakra pathway, stretched taut to contain the storm, had snapped back, leaving behind a network of shredded protesting tissue. He doubled over, a harsh wet racking cough tearing from his lungs. He ripped his wolf mask from his face with a trembling hand, gasping for air that felt like fire. A second cough tore from him, and a thick spray of blood spattered across the pale stone floor, dark and vivid in the candlelight. He slid down the wall until he was slumped on the ground, his body screaming. This was the calculated cost of wielding a forbidden power. The full, unrestrained technique would have killed him. This lesser form, the SHM, was survivable. But survival had its own terrible price. With a monumental effort, he fought the encroaching darkness. He fumbled for a sealed pouch at his waist, his fingers clumsy and shaking, and retrieved a small Ed Viola gift from Orochimaru's labs before his defection, provided by Danzo himself. Pills designed not to heal, but to suppress the body's own self-destructive responses to extreme trauma. He threw the chalky black pills into his mouth and swallowed them, the taste bitter and acrid on his blood-coated tongue. He lay there, breath coming in ragged gasps, waiting. Slowly, the chemicals worked. The fire in his nerves receded to a deep ache. The tremors subsided. He could breathe again. One down, his thoughts were a ragged whisper in his own mind. One to go. He looked at the blood on the floor. His blood. He thought of the silent, sleeping compound above, of the faces of the people he was about to execute. He thought of Izumi. Shisui Izumi, I have to keep going. Using the cold stone of Danzo's desk as leverage, he dragged his trembling, broken body upright. He swayed, the room tilting violently, and waited for the world to steady. He picked up his wolf mask, wiped the blood from its interior, and slid it back into place, the cool porcelain a familiar comforting weight. He turned his back on the dead serpent and the ruin of his chambers, and melted back into the tunnels. The ascent from the dead heart of Root was a slow, deliberate climb back into the world of the living. Naruto moved through the labyrinthine tunnels not with the furious speed of his descent, but with a grim, measured pace. This extra time was a gift. The potent Orochimarutosan pills were a chemical miracle, a poison fighting a greater poison. The searing agony in his chakra pathways receded, numbed into the familiar deep-seated ache that had become the baseline of his existence. His Uzumaki vitality, a stubborn, indomitable fire, fought against the self-inflicted damage, crudely mending the worst of the wounds. By the time he reached the final ladder, he was not whole, but he was functional. He was a weapon that had been broken and reforged, still lethally sharp, but forever scarred. He pushed the heavy iron sower grate aside and emerged into the cool night air. The world above was a shock to the senses. The scent of damp earth and night-blooming jasmine, the gentle caress of the wind, the vast open skit was all alien, a world he no longer felt a part of. He stood for a moment in the shadows of the old city wall, a ghost returned from a tomb of his own making. His target was visible from there, the walled Uchiha district, a proud isolated island in the heart of Konoha. He didn't hesitate. He moved, a blur of motion that no longer crackled with lightning, but was instead a deeper, more profound silence. He arrived atop the main gate, a silent gargoyle looking down upon the place that held his fondest memories. The compound was not asleep. A state of high alert, a direct consequence of Shisui's failed infiltration, had turned the district into a fortress. Uchiha police force patrols moved like specters through the streets below, their crimson Sharingan eyes cutting through every shadow like glowing embers. The air was thick with a tension so palpable it felt like a physical weight. This was his mentor's home. The home of the girl he loved. And it was now his hunting ground. He began to weave a complex series of hand signs, his movements precise, betraying none of the damage that still ravaged his system. This was in Uzumaki art, something taught to him not by Fugaku, but by his mother. Uzumaki sealing art, four-sided silent prison formation. He pressed his palms onto the heavy wooden beams of the gate. An invisible, silent wave of chakra washed over the entire district. It was not a violent jutsu, but a subtle, suffocating one. From the outside, nothing would appear changed. But within, the compound was now a soundless tomb. The barrier would absorb everything. No alarm bell, no scream, no roar of a fireball would ever reach the ears of the sleeping village. No one could enter. And, most importantly, no one could leave. He had sealed their fate. He had sealed his own. His manjicum flared to life, its three-bladed shuriken pattern spinning slowly as he looked down. He saw the patrols, the seals on the doors, the chakra signatures within the houses. He saw the main house, once a place of warm memories, now just another target on a grid. The image of Izumi's face, her eyes filled with a heartbreaking confusion, flashed in his mind. The feeling was a physical blow, a stab of agony the pills could not touch. For a single terrifying moment, his resolve wavered. He could stop. He could let them live and face the inevitable civil war. Then, he remembered Shisui's body growing cold in his arms. He remembered his friend's final, desperate plea, protect the peace, do what you must. He crushed the grief, burying the boy who loved Izumi Uchiha under a mountain of cold, hard duty. The mission was absolute. The sickness that had taken root in this clan had to be purged completely. No adult who drew breath in this clan during the planning of this coup will see the dawn. His thoughts were as cold and sharp as honed steel. Only the children. They are the future. The rest are the disease. It must be cut out. He drew his tanto, its non-reflective black blade seeming to drink the moonlight. He took one last look at the village beyond the barrier, a final, silent goodbye to the world he was sacrificing everything to protect. Then, he dropped from the gate. The ghost had entered the tomb, and the hunt had begun. The moment his feet touched the ground inside the barrier, the world changed. The distant comforting sounds of Konoha vanished, replaced by the oppressive artificial silence of his own jutsu. It was the silence of a vacuum, the silence before a final breath. His manjicum, a terrible and brilliant crimson compass, guided him into the labyrinth of narrow alleyways and shadowed gardens he knew as intimately as his own apartment. This was where he and Izumi had played hide and seek as children. Tonight, he would use those memories of innocence as a map for methodical slaughter. His first target was a patrol of 4. Among them was Uchiha Tekka, a man who had once ruffled Naruto's hair at a festival and praised his ambition. Naruto became a shadow among shadows, tracking them from the rooftops. He waited, his patience inhuman, until their route took them past the old koi pond in the district central garden. He dropped a single custom-made smoke pellet into a decorative bamboo fountain. It released a smoke laced with a mild agent that specifically irritated the sensitive tear ducts connected to the Sharingan. The effect was instantaneous. The patrol coughed, their perfect vision blurring, their coordination faltering. "Ass!" Tekka yelled, his voice muffled and panicked. "Fall back. Form A." He never finished. Naruto moved, no longer a storm of lightning, but a whisper of steel. He flickered from the shadows behind Tekka, one hand clamping over the man's mouth as his other drove the tanto cleanly through the back of his neck. He used the dying man's body as a shield, a dead weight to absorb the frantic shuriken thrown by his comrades. Before the other 3 could pinpoint his location in the swirling smoke, he was among them. A flicker to the left, a quick brutal slash across the throat. A flicker to the right, a precise upward thrust under a chin and into the brain. The last man, his eyes wide with a terror he couldn't voice, opened his mouth to scream a warning that would never be heard. Naruto was already there, his hand over the man's face, his tanto sliding between the ribs to pierce the heart. "He had a son," a voice whispered in his mind. He crushed the thought and dragged the 4 bodies into the murky water of the koi pond. They sank without a sound, their blood turning the dark water black. He moved on, his heart a cold, heavy stone in his chest. Each kill was a new wound on his soul. These were not blank miscrude agents. These were men he knew. He remembered their faces, their families, their voices. And he killed them all the same. He bypassed the guards and seals of the elder councilmen, their defenses a child's puzzle to his Uzumaki heritage. He found the first, Uchiha Yashiro, meditating in his study. The old man's eyes snapped open as Naruto flickered into the room. Yashiro breathed, his face a mask of shock and fury. "For your treason," Naruto whispered, his voice a dead, hollow thing. The fight, if it could be called that, lasted less than 2 seconds. He moved from house to house, a phantom of death in the sleeping district, becoming brutally, terrifyingly efficient. Guided by his Sharingan, he would move to the parents' bedroom first. A hand over a mouth. A swift, silent strike. He learned to do it without waking the other parent, granting them a final unknowing second of peace. He saw the lives they had built, family portraits on the walls, children's drawings taped to refrigerators. In one house, he found a couple asleep in each other's arms. He killed them that way, a single fluid strike for each, leaving their bodies undisturbed in their final embrace. With each kill, the voice in his head grew louder, a litany of ghosts. "This is Anabi. This is Yoruichi. You saw him at the dango shop with his wife last week. This is Yukumi. His daughter is Izumi's friend." Each memory was a fresh stab of agony. The pills numbed the pain in his body, but they did nothing for the torment in his soul. The weight of it was crushing, a physical pressure that made it hard to breathe. He felt a wetness on his cheeks and realized with distant shock that he was crying, silent tears tracking paths down his face from behind the unfeeling eyes of his mask. The cry was thin and sharp, a needle of sound piercing the suffocating silence of the Uchiha compound. It was the sound of a baby waking in the dark. In their bedroom, Akira Uchiha and his wife, Setsuna, stirred. "Asa is awake," Setsuna murmured, a mother's instinct overriding her exhaustion. Akira was already moving, his hand reaching not for a lamp, but for the kunai he kept by the bedside. "Stay here," he whispered, his voice tight. The silence outside wasn't right. It was heavy, tasting of ozone and something metallic and wrong. Ignoring him, Setsuna was already at his side. Together, they moved down the short dark hallway. The nursery door was slightly ajar. Pushing it open, they stepped inside. And their world ended. The room was bathed in the cold light of the full moon. In the center of the room, standing over the crib of their crying daughter, was a figure. He was drenched in blood. It soaked his dark uniform, dripped from his gloved fingertips, and stained the white porcelain of his wolf mask in gruesome arterial patterns. He held a drawn tanto, its black blade seeming to drink the moonlight. They knew him instantly. And in that horrifying moment, they understood. Naruto. Setsuna breathed, a hand flying to her mouth, the sound a strangled sob of disbelief. Akira's training took over. He pushed his wife slightly behind him, his eyes locked on the blood-soaked specter of his former student. There was no escape. He knew the boy's speed, the power coiled beneath that terrifying stillness. His mind raced not for a counterattack, but to a single desperate question. "Does your duty extend to the children?" Akira asked, his voice surprisingly steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "Does Asa die for the clan's mistakes?" The figure in the wolf mask was silent for a short moment, the only sound the terrified cries of their daughter. Then, he sheathed his blade. The sound was soft, final. "No," Naruto's voice was a flat, dead thing. "Say your goodbyes." It is the only courtesy I can offer my former sensei. The kunai slipped from Akira's numb fingers, clattering against the wooden floor. It was the sound of a warrior's will breaking, the sound of a father choosing his daughter over a fight he could never win. A choked sob escaped him, a sound of such profound, heartbreaking gratitude it seemed to physically pain him. Tears streamed down Satsuna's face as they stumbled towards the crib, desperate to claim these last, stolen seconds. Akira gently lifted his daughter, her tiny body trembling. Asa's wails softened as she buried her face in the familiar safety of her father's neck. Satsuna leaned in, her body shaking with uncontrollable sobs. "Oh, my baby, my sweet, sweet Asa," she whispered, her voice fractured and raw. "Listen to me, little one. Your mother, I wanted to see you take your first steps, I wanted to braid your hair and teach you how to make dango." Her words dissolved into weeping. She took a ragged breath. "Don't be like us. Our pride, our foolish pride, don't let it touch you. Just live. Live a happy life, be kind and know that your mother loved you more than life itself." Akira held his daughter tighter, inhaling her scent one last time. "Our clan was blinded, Asa," he murmured, his voice a raw, broken sound. "We chose shadows over the light. Don't you ever make that choice. Honor us not with vengeance. Honor us by living a life of peace. Listen to your heart." He kissed her forehead, his lips trembling. "We will always be with you." But the final, lingering kiss, Akira laid Asa back in her crib. Satsuna pulled the small blanket up to her daughter's chin. They took one last look at their children angel, who would never remember them, and then they turned. Their faces were tear-streaked, yet through the agony, a strange and terrible peace had settled in their eyes. Naruto had watched with a profound, chilling stillness. The boy who would have been shattered by such a display was long gone, buried under a mountain of duty. He stepped forward. "Close your eyes." As they did, a gentle wave of chakra washed over them. In their final moment, they did not see a blood-soaked killer. They saw a sun-drenched field. They saw their daughter, Asa, grown and happy, running towards them, her laughter like the sound of bells. A single, swift motion. There was no sound. Naruto stood over the two bodies. He looked down at the nonchalant baby in the crib, her wide Uchiha eyes staring up at his terrifying mask. He met her gaze and, with a final gentle pulse of chakra, put her to a dreamless peaceful sleep. He felt a piece of his own heart crack and turn to dust. He backed away from the crib, from the sleeping orphan child, and melted back into the shadows. The work was not finished. There were still dozens of adults left, shinobi, police, civilians all tainted by the coup's poison. He moved through the silent streets, the weight of 100 stolen lives settling on his small shoulders. In his methodical purge, a single mistake was inevitable. A floorboard creaked a fraction too loudly. A shadow shifted a moment too soon. It was enough. A sharp, high-pitched whistle, the distinct sound of a police force alert, cut through the night. It was answered instantly by another, then another. Doors were thrown open. Shinobi poured into the streets, their red Sharingan eyes blazing. "Sector Gamma, report." A voice barked over their internal comms. "No contact with Yushiro-sama's estate. Patrol 4 is gone. I repeat, Patrol 4 is not responding. Enemy contact at my location. In Abysin is he's dead. My whole squad." As the transmission ended in a wet choking sound. The reports cascaded, painting a picture of a systematic slaughter. The confusion coalesced into a terrifying realization: the enemy was already inside the tomb with them. The hornet's nest had been kicked. Naruto stood on a rooftop overlooking the central plaza, watching the chaos unfold. The time for stealth was over. He dropped from the rooftop, landing in the center of the plaza with a soft thud that was impossibly loud in the charged air. He drew his tanto and waited, a lone, blood-soaked wolf in the heart of the killing ground. The first team of 5 Chunin arrived. "It's him." One yelled. "The Anbu. He's the one." Fire-style Great Fireball Jutsu. 5 massive orbs of roiling flame converged on him. Naruto didn't move. Water-style water formation wall. A massive vortex of water erupted around him, meeting the fireballs in a deafening hiss of steam that instantly enveloped the plaza in a thick blinding fog. This was his new killing ground. The Uchiha saw his chakra signature, a blazing sun in the center of the steam. "He's there. Surround him," they commanded, moving in. But the chakra signature was a lie, a clone left as a beacon. The real Naruto was already moving along the edge of the steam, a phantom in the mist. He struck from their flank. The first Uchiha felt a sharp pain in his back and nothing more. The second turned at the sound of his comrade hitting the ground, only to find Naruto's masked face inches from his own, before the tanto slid under his chin. The Uchiha were masters, but they were fighting a ghost who knew their tactics, their weaknesses, and he used their predictability against them. "He's using the steam. Photon users, clear the area now." A new voice roared as more shinobi poured in. A powerful gust of wind tore the steam away, revealing Naruto standing over the bodies of the first squad. The rage of the clan was absolute. They attacked as one, a wave of fire and steel. This was no longer a purge. This was a war. Naruto met the wave. His Tanto was a blur, deflecting, parrying, killing. But he was one against dozens. A kunai sliced a deep gash in his leg. A fireball grazed his shoulder, searing through his uniform. The tremors in his hands grew more pronounced. He was bleeding. He was being worn down. He looked up, his manjicum spinning, taking in the sea of furious, had-filled faces he had once known as neighbors. He saw the trap closing. An officer, a grim-faced man named Uchiha Tetsaya, stepped forward. "You fight with Uchiha efficiency, Anbu," he called out. "You know our forms, our techniques. Who are you? Who is the traitor who would dare raise a hand against the pride of Konoha?" The question hung in the air. In the chaos of a parry, the strap of his mask had been partially severed. As he turned to face them, the damaged mask shifted. For a split second, the moonlight caught the face beneath. The whisker marks. The shock of blonde hair. And the impossible, crimson manjicum spinning in an eye that should have been blue. The collective gasp rippled through the crowd. "Naruto." One whispered, the name a fragile, broken thing. The Hokage's son. Tetsuya's face twisted, his fury replaced by a look of utter, soul-crushing betrayal. "You," he spat, the word laced with venom. The boy Fugaki-sama himself trained. His voice rose to a roar of pure, unadulterated hatred. "Kinslayer. Traitor." The words echoed across the plaza, a final judgment. Naruto straightened. He reached a hand to his face, settling the mask back into place, hiding the boy and leaving only the wolf. He accepted the titles. They were the price. He closed his eyes for a single moment. The last tear he would ever shed for them, a single drop of blood from his strained manjicum, traced a path down his cheek, hidden from the world. He opened his eyes, and the last flicker of the boy was gone. He did not raise his blade. He did not speak of his reasons. He simply looked upon the last remnants of the Uchiha clan and gave them his final terrible answer. "Your resistance is futile." A torrent of chakra, immense and ancient, erupted from him. It was not crackling blue, but a deep, spectral, blue-red energy that bled into the air like ink in water, chilling it, making moisture crystallize into a fine, glittering frost. The energy arose from him, coalescing with a sound like grinding stone and tearing silk. The Uchiha, masters of chakra, could only stare in abject terror. This was not ninjutsu. This was something primal, something from the darkest legends of their own clan. First, a colossal ribsage of pure crimson force materialized around him, the sheer pressure of its manifestation throwing the closest shinobi back. "It's not a jutsu," Tetsuya whispered, his face ashen, his sharingan wide with dawning ancestral horror. "It's Susanoo." The structure grew. Vertebrae stacked upon one another, skeletal arms erupted from newly formed shoulder joints. A colossal, wolf-headed samurai of pure, destructive will now towered over the plaza, its empty eye sockets burning with a malevolent crimson light. In its massive armored hands, it held a pair of spectral katanas, their blades the color of polished obsidian. Inside the chest of this crimson god of death, Naruto stood, his small, bleeding form an insignificant heart in a body of pure will. His manjicum glowed from within the Susanoo's helm like twin dying stars. "For the future," he whispered. From the Susanoo, the words echoed, amplified into a deep resonant pronouncement that vibrated in the very bones of the last Uchiha. The colossal samurai raised one of its obsidian katanas. It moved with impossible, graceful speed. As the blade sliced through the air, a vast crescent-shaped arc of pure crimson chakra flew from its edge. Tetsuya and the 5 shinobi beside him had just enough time for their sharingan to register the incoming wave of absolute death before it washed over them. There was no sound. Their bodies were bisected, and before they could even fall, the residual energy ignited. They erupted in pillars of crimson flame, erased from existence. The remaining Uchiha screamed, a sound of pure animal terror. They turned to flee. The Susanoo brought its 2 colossal, armored hands together. The blue-red chakra of the construct began to churn and hiss, now infused with the raw, chaotic nature of lightning. A flicker of a memory, sharp as a shard of glass, cut through Naruto's focus, a younger Kakashi demonstrating the lightning beast. A loyal hound made of pure chakra. He had taken that concept and twisted it, amplified it through the monstrous lens of his manjicum. He had made a pack of killers. Great and rage, no mere Naruto's amplified voice boomed. Lightning release, pack of lightning beasts. The Susanoo slammed its hands down onto the plaza. From the glowing fissures in the stone erupted a pack of hunting wolves, their bodies forged from pure crackling crimson energy. The slaughter was no longer a judgment, it was a hunt. The wolves of lightning moved with impossible speed, tearing through the fleeing shinobi, leaving only blackened scorch marks on the stone. When the last Uchiha had been torn apart, the spectral wolves converged, imploding in a final cataclysmic detonation. When the light faded, the plaza was a massive, smoking, glass-lined crater. There was nothing left. It was over. The colossal Susanoo dissolved until only Naruto was left standing at the heart of the crater. The Kinslayer. The traitor. He swayed, his body a screaming chorus of ravaged nerves. He fumbled for the lead vial, swallowing another of the chalky black pills. From the edge of the crater, a figure emerged from the shadows of the main house. It was the man he had been avoiding. The final target. The impostor wearing the face of Fugaku Uchiha. All of this death to what end, Naruto? The impostor's voice was a perfect imitation of Fugaku's, laced with a chilling, sorrowful authority. You have become a monster to prevent a possibility. I became what I had to, Naruto rasped, his voice raw and broken. I did it to stop you. To stop the coup. The coup? Fugaku gave a low, humorless chuckle. The desperate ramblings of a dying clan. It would have failed. And now, you have done their work for them. You have failed your clan. Your village. And your mentor. With that, he drew his katana, its blade wreathed in roaring orange flame. The battle that followed was not a spectacle. It was a brutal, intimate duel. Fugaku attacked, his style a perfect replica of the real Fugaku's. Naruto, his body a failing machine, met him heat forcing a stream of Genkai Topperake SHM into his tanto. Their swords met, a shower of orange and blue sparks. Sloppy, Naruto, his opponent growled. You rely too much on speed, and your body is betraying you. He was right. The pain was returning, a white-hot tide drowning his focus. He had one last gambit. He disengaged, creating distance. He saw an opening, a fractional lowering of Fugaku's guard. It was a trap. He knew it was a trap. But it was the only path forward. He abandoned his sword, pouring the very last dregs of his power into his right hand. A chaotic shrieking spear of purple and white lightning, the final unrestrained fury of the Genkai Topperake SHM, formed in his palm. He lunged. As he thrust his hand forward, a flicker, a distortion, a subtle almost invisible warp of reality occurred between them. And then, his hand struck home. He felt the thud of impact. The sickening resistance of flesh and bone. The warmth of blood washing over his hand. The man he had impaled looked down at the lightning-wreathed hand buried in his chest, his eyes wide not with fury, but with a profound, shocked sadness. It was the real Fugaku Uchiha. The psychological blow was total, a black hole opening in Naruto's soul, extinguishing everything. Fugaku coughed, a spray of blood speckling Naruto's mask. He didn't fight. He simply raised a trembling hand, not to push Naruto away, but to rest it on his shoulder. You have grown strong, Naruto, Fugaku whispered, his voice a wet ragged sound. His fading Sharingan looked not at the monster, but at the boy beneath. So strong I am proud. Naruto's mind shattered. A choked sob, a sound of pure agony, escaped him. Fugaku's grip tightened. This is not your fault, he gasped. Whatever terrible burden you carry, know that I forgive you. He looked past Naruto, at the dark empty space where his home used to be. Take care of Izumi. His last breath was a plea that was a curse, a final poisoned dagger in Naruto's heart. Protect her smile. The light in his eyes faded. He was gone. It's too late, Naruto whispered to the dead man, a hollow echo of a promise he could now never keep. He pulled his blood-soaked hand free. The warmth of the dango shop lingered like a pleasant ghost, a sweet, sticky scent on her fingertips, and the echo of Saki's quiet laugh still in her ears. Izumi walked through the familiar emptying streets of Konoha, a comfortable peace settling in her chest. The day's training had been grueling, Hana's victory a slight sting to her pride, but the easy camaraderie of her friends made it all feel worthwhile. Normal. A small, genuine smile touched her lips as she replayed one of Hana's exasperated complaints about her Ninken pups. The smile faded as she drew closer to her own district. The usual evening quiet was different tonight. It felt deeper, heavier. The ambient hum of a living village, the distant clatter of a closing shop, the murmur of late-night conversations from open windows was gone. The silence was an absence, a void. A knot of unease began to form in her stomach. She saw them then. On the rooftops. Figures, dark and still against the rising moon. Anbu. But they weren't on their fluid patrols, they were stationed, unmoving, like stone gargoyles watching over a tomb. A perimeter. Her pace quickened, the comfortable warmth of moments ago now a distant memory, replaced by a sudden biting chill. She reached the main gate of the Uchiha district. A faint, almost invisible shimmer distorted the air before it. It was a barrier, translucent and humming with a faint, oppressive energy she could feel in her teeth. Hesitantly, she reached a hand out. The barrier yielded to her touch, her Uchiha chakra acting as a key. It felt like passing through a cool, static-urged mist. The moment she stepped through, the world ended. The last faint sounds of the village were severed. The silence was absolute, a physical pressure that made the air feel thick in her lungs. The street was littered with the bodies of the Uchiha police force. One man was slumped against the guard post, his eyes wide and staring at nothing, a single clean slice across his throat. Another lay face down in a pool of his own blood, already beginning to congeal. The sight was so fundamentally, violatingly wrong that her body reacted before her mind could. A searing, hot pain erupted behind her eyes, as if twin needles had been plunged into her skull. Her vision bled into a sharp, disorienting crimson. A choked gasp tore from her throat as her Tuotomo Sharingan flared to life, not by her will, but by sheer unadulterated horror. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to force the world away, but she couldn't. It felt as if her eyelids had been fused open. The Sharingan was locked on, a searing burning focus that refused to disengage. She was now a living camera, cursed to record everything. Stumbling forward, her legs trembling, she was forced to see the world through this new terrible clarity. The Sharingan didn't just see it analyzed. It dissected. It burned every detail into her memory with agonizing precision. She saw the spray of blood on the wall, not as a smear, but as 1,000 tiny, distinct droplets, a grotesque constellation. This isn't real, her mind fractured, grasping for denial. It's a genjutsu. It has to be. She ran towards her home, her safe harbor, but every street was a new tableau of hell. An entire house was a smoldering ruin, the air thick with the smell of burnt tatami and something else, something sweet and sickeningly coppery. In an alley, she saw a tangle of limbs in dark blue uniforms, cut down in a desperate last stand. Her eyes caught the glint of a discarded kunai, its edge still wet. The woman she recognized from the market lay in her doorway, a bag of spilled groceries scattered around her like fallen petals. Her Sharingan catalogued the way a single perfect apple had rolled into a pool of its owner's blood. Please, she begged to no one, the thoughts a frantic, silent scream. Just let them be okay. Kasen, Tausen, Sasu, please, please, please. The sound, a deafening boom, finally shattered the silence. It was followed by a colossal hiss, like 1,000 angry snakes. She looked up. Above the rooftops, the night sky was on fire. A massive pillar of orange flame reached for the moon, met by a furious crackling explosion of blue-white lightning that tore through it, shattering it into a rain of embers. The clash of chakra was so immense that the very ground trembled. This was not a skirmish. This was a battle between titans. The sight was a beacon of terrible hope. A fight. Her father was fighting. She ran, her lungs burning, and reached the edge of the central plaza. It was gone. In its place was a massive, smoking crater of fused obsidian. In the center, two figures were locked in a duel of impossible speed. But her Sharingan saw it all. One figure was her father, his katana a vortex of orange flame. The other was a blood-soaked Anbu, wreathed in a sputtering aura of blue-white lightning. She saw the shock of blonde hair beneath a wolf mask. She saw the fluid Kenjutsu stance, a terrifying, flawless mirror of her father's own style, a style he had taught to only one student. She saw him. And she knew. The pieces of the nightmare slammed into place, forming a single, soul-shattering truth. A desperate, hopeless scream tore from the depths of her soul, a name that was both a plea and a curse. Naruto. The sound was swallowed by the chaos. The two figures didn't flinch, their duel continuing as her father's flaming katana met Naruto's lightning-worth blade in a deafening hiss. Frozen at the edge of the devastation, she watched. This was an impossible nightmare. Her father was fighting to the death. And his opponent, the boy whose smile was the sun in her world, was a blood-soaked monster trying to kill him. Her heart was being torn in two. One part screamed for her father to win, to strike down this terrible apparition. But another, deeper part prayed for Naruto to stop, to wake up from this madness. She saw Naruto stumble, his lightning aura sputtering violently. She saw her father press the advantage, a whirlwind of Uchiha fury. For a single, impossible moment, a sliver of terrifying hope flared in her heart. He's winning. Tausen is winning. The thought was immediately followed by a wave of sickening dread. Winning means killing Naruto. Then, she saw Naruto abandon his sword. She saw him let it fall, the lightning dying as it clattered against the obsidian. She saw him pour the very last of his power, his will, his life, into his right hand. A chaotic, shrieking spear of violent purple and white lightning formed in his palm. This was the last move. And her father wasn't dodging. He was meeting it. One of them was about to die. The sight was the breaking point. The trauma of the last hour coalesced into a single catastrophic moment. The pain behind her eyes exploded into a universe of wide agony. It felt as if hot glass was shattering inside her skull. A single choked cry of pure physical pain escaped her lips as the world vanished. It was not a descent into darkness. It was a rebirth in fire. The two tomo in each eye spun with violent speed, blurring and bleeding together before snapping into a new terrible formation. When her vision slammed back into focus, it was sharper, clearer, and more cruel than ever. 3 perfect crimson tomo now spun in each of her eyes. A single hot tear of blood traced a path down her cheek. And with her new perfect eyes, she saw everything. The world had slowed to a crawl. She saw Naruto's hand moving through the air. She saw her father's eyes widen, not in fear, but in a kind of resigned, profound sadness. And then she saw the most impossible thing of all. Her father's hand, trembling, came to rest on Naruto's shoulder. It wasn't a strike. It wasn't a block. It was gentle. His lips moved, forming words she could not hear. She watched the light fade from his eyes. She watched his hand slip from Naruto's shoulder. The battle was over. She ran, her sandals slipping on the slick obsidian. She arrived just in time to see the most monstrous act of all. She saw Naruto pull his hand free from her father's chest with a sickening, wet sound. She watched as he let her father's body slump to the ground, a discarded thing. She watched him turn his back on the man he had just murdered. She fell to her knees beside her father's body, her hands hovering over the gaping wound in his chest, afraid to touch, afraid to confirm what her terrible eyes already knew. "Tausen," she whispered, a fragile, broken prayer. She looked up. Naruto stood mere feet away, a silent, blood-soaked monolith. His shadow fell over her and her father's body, a cold, suffocating blanket. And then, with a faint groan of pained muscles, he knelt. Not to her. He knelt beside her, facing the body of Hyugaku Uchiha, his head bowed. For a single, surreal, mind-breaking moment, they were not killer and witness. They were two mourners at a grave. The contradiction was so profound it shattered her ability to think. He finally spoke, and his voice was not the snarl of a monster, but a low, ragged rasp. "They make you a promise, you know," he began, his gaze fixed on her father's still face. "They promise you strength. They promise you purpose. A family called the village." He looked up at the dark, empty space where the Uchiha district used to be. "They tell you about the will of fire. A beautiful, warm light. They tell you to protect the smiles of the people. And we believe them. Because we are children." The shudder racked his body. "Stop it," she whispered, a raw, shaking denial. "The boy who sat on the Hokage monument and promised me he would protect everyone, that wasn't a lie. Wasn't it?" He turned his head, and his manjicum, a terrible vortex of crimson and black, locked onto her own spinning eyes. Or was it just a child's dream, before he learned what the world really is? "Your father believed, too. He was a good man, Izumi. A strong man. A loyal man." His voice became a torrent of venom. "And look where it got him. Lying dead at my feet. Because their precious pride made them weak. Their bonds made them slow. Their love made them predictable." He leaned closer, his words cold as ice. "There is no will of fire, Izumi. There is only power. And the will to use it. That is why they are dead. And I am not." "No." She screamed, her voice cracking. "You're not. You're in pain. The Naruto I know is still." He looked up, and the agony in his eyes was gone, replaced by a void of pure, chilling emptiness. "The boy you knew is a corpse, Izumi," he stated, his voice flat. "He's lying in this crater with the rest of them. I am what crawled out of his grave." He looked from her eyes to her father's still form, and then back. "Monsters aren't born. They are made. The world takes children who believe in promises and breaks them. They took me. They broke me. And they made me into a perfect tool." His lips twisted into a grotesque, joyless smile. "And look where it brought them. Their promises, their lies, their village, they are of no consequence now. So take this pain, Izumi," he whispered, his final words a chilling invitation to a world made of ash. "Take this loss. Let it be the only thing you trust, because it is the only thing that will never lie to you. Your father's love was a weakness that got him killed. My promise to you was a child's dream I have now personally burned away. The will of fire is a fairy tale." He locked his empty manjicum onto her terrified eyes. So forget it all. Forget the boy you knew. Forget the promises. Let this moment be the only truth you have left. She had only one weapon left. Her last resort. "I love you." The words were a raw, desperate war cry. "I don't believe you. The real you is still in there, and I love you, Naruto. So please just stop." Her one agonizing, suspended heartbeat, his entire facade shattered. The cold emptiness in his manjicum vanished, replaced by a flash of pure, profound agony so deep it was terrifying. His shoulders slumped. She saw him, the boy she loved, trapped in an absolute, unbearable torment. But just as quickly, the wall slammed back down, harder and colder than before. A harsh, ugly laugh tore from his throat. "Love," he spat the word like poison. "You offer me the most beautiful lie of all, and you expect it to save you?" He gestured cruelly at her heart. "That feeling isn't real. It is a chemical lie. It is a dream, Izumi. And I am what happens when you wake up." He leaned in, his voice a final, soul-shattering whisper. "Your love for me, it is the same beautiful, useless weakness that made him hesitate. It is the reason his body is lying at your feet, and it is the reason you are kneeling here, broken and worthless." He straightened up. The lesson was complete. "When you have finally accepted this truth," he said, his voice a void, "when you understand that every bond is just a chain, then you will be free. Find me then, Izumi." His manjicum spun. And I will show you what a person can become when they have nothing left to lose. With that, he turned his back on her. It was the one attack her mind could not fight. Her world became a silent, empty void. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed, a broken doll on the cold ground beside her father's corpse. The last body fell. The silence that followed was not of battle, but of completion. Naruto stood in the empty street, drenched in the blood of the Uchiha. He had purged the district. He had saved the village. So why did it feel like the world had ended? He began to walk, each step an act of supreme will, a journey through a landscape of memories he had just murdered. Why? The thought was a raw, silent cry in the hollow space where his heart used to be. Why was this the only path? A searing, white-hot pain erupted behind his eyes. He stumbled, slamming his shoulder against a wall as a vision shattered his reality. Konoha burning from within, a civil war, the end of everything. A thick tear of blood welled in his left eye and traced a path down his cheek. He had seen the future he had just prevented. He forced himself onward, the weight of that terrible vision settling on him. He thought of Izumi, shattered by his cruelty. "I'm sorry, Izumi. I only ever wanted to protect your smile." The manjicum pulsed again, another agonizing flare. But this vision was different. He saw himself, older, as the goddamn Hokage, a genuine smile on his face. And then he saw her. Izumi, a woman of impossible grace, her face illuminated by a smile so bright it outshone the sun. She was carrying their child. A future of peace. A future of love. A future he had just murdered. He cried out, a raw, choked sound of agony, and fell to his knees as blood streamed from his right eye. So that is the shape of it. The realization was crystalline, shattering the last of the boy he had been. The two paths. Their end or my own. He had saved Konoha from one hell, only to lose his personal heaven. They ask you to be a savior, he thought, a bitter, silent laugh scraping his raw throat, but they never tell you that the sacrifice they demand is not your life, but your heaven. He pushed himself up and walked to the main house. He found them in the living area. Mikoto was on her knees, shielding an unconscious Asuke, her Sharingan blazing with maternal fury. "So," she said, her voice trembling but hard as steel. "The Hokage's demon has come. If you are here to harm my son, you will have to kill me first." The monster, the wolf, the kinslayer, faltered. He reached up with a shaking hand and unclipped his mask. "Naruto." The name was a choked, disbelieving whisper. "You?" He was brutally honest. "I killed him, Mikoto-san." His voice was a raw, broken rasp. "I killed your husband. I killed the clan." "Why?" she whispered. "I was against it." "Why you, Naruto?" "The man who led the coup was an impostor," he rasped. "He took Fugaku-sensei's face over a year ago. But the man I just killed, that was the real Fugaku-sensei. The impostor used him as a final shield. I killed your husband." The contradiction broke her. A guttural sob of pure, soul-shattering grief tore from her throat. "I did not kill Shisui," Naruto continued. "Danzo's forces did. This was the only way to save the village from a civil war." Before she could process it, he vanished, appearing before her. A single, precise chop to the back of her neck. She crumpled, unconscious, over her son. He gently laid her down, tears now falling freely. He brought his trembling fingers to her forehead. Black sealing script spread across her skin, glowed with a faint purple light, and then faded. He leaned down, his voice a ragged whisper, a final command buried deep within the seal. "You will forget this. You will believe the lies. You will see me as a traitor and you will live." He took a shuddering breath. "But when the time comes, this seal will break. You will remember. And when Izumi is broken by her vengeance, you must be the one to tell her the truth." He stood, put his mask back on, and stumbled out of the house. The barrier shattered. The profound, artificial silence was broken, and the panicked sounds of the village rushed in. On the roof of the Uchiha main house, Naruto stood, a lone figure in a sea of death. "They're here," he thought. He pushed off the roof, a ghost flowing through the shadowed alleys towards the one chakra signature that blazed like a sun in the night, the Hokage Tower. Minato stood on the highest balcony. He had felt the Uchiha chakra signatures vanish. He had felt the violent eruption of a familiar power. He had felt the agonized signature of his own son, burning like a dying star. He knew. The whisper of displaced air. Naruto materialized behind him. Minato didn't turn. He raised a hand, and a shimmering dome of pale gold chakra enveloped the tower, ensuring their privacy. "I'm sorry, Tao-san," Naruto's voice was a raw, broken rasp. Minato stood with his back to his son, the silence heavier than any accusation. "The coup was ready," Naruto reported, his voice hollow. "Shisui's plan failed. The impostor and Danzo, I couldn't wait. Danzo and Root are dead. The Uchiha, the adults, are dead." He choked on the last words. "I couldn't save Fugaku-sensei. The impostor used him." He waited for his sentence. Minato finally turned, his face a landscape of terrible sorrow. A small, bitter, heartbreaking smile touched his lips. "You know," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears, "your mother and I, Fugaku and Mikoto, we used to joke about the day you'd finally take this hat from me with Izumi-chan by your side." The words were a ghost of a happier time. "Looks like we were all fools." The father's grief receded, replaced by the Hokage's cold pragmatism. The village cannot know the truth. They need a story they can understand. They need a monster to hate. You saved them. And for that I have to hunt you. I have to brand you a traitor. Naruto looked at his father, at the crushing weight behind his eyes. He saw the personal agony warring with the cold duty. He understood. He gave a slow, stiff nod. "I know," he whispered. "I understand." He took a shuddering breath. "Let me still serve, Towson. From the outside. The village needs a blade in the dark. A ghost. Let me be that ghost." Minato stared, seeing a terrifyingly pragmatic shinobi emerging from the ashes. "A deniable asset," he said, the words tasting like ash. "The official report will be simple. You went rogue. You massacred the clan. When I confronted you, you escaped. You will be ensrank Missingen, effective immediately." He locked eyes with his son. "Your only contact will be with me. Through secret dead drop locations." Naruto accepted the terms of his lonely existence. He had two final conditions. The payments funnel it into a blind trust. "For the Uchiha orphans, it's the only thing I can still do." He paused, his voice a raw, desperate whisper. "And Izumi, when she wants to join Anbu to hunt me, don't let her, Towson. Please. Keep her out of the shadows. Keep her in the light. That is all I ask." Minato gave a single, slow, solemn nod. "It will be done. I saw it, just for a moment. A future, warm and bright. A life." Her smile, the thing of beauty. "And I sacrificed it." The dream did not begin, it was simply a state of being, an eternal, repeating moment of failure. There was no sound, only the oppressive crushing silence that followed the final scream. The Uchiha Plaza was a crater of glassed over stone, reflecting a sky choked with ash and the malevolent crimson glow of his own creation. A fine, steady rain began to fall, not to cleanse, but to bear witness. The ghosts came then. They always did. They came not as apparitions, but as visceral, sensory assaults. He was 9 again in an undisclosed safe house, the Anbu mask a new and suffocating weight. He saw Konoha Trader's eyes widen in shocked betrayal, but the memory was not the sight, it was the grotesque warmth of blood soaking through his glove, a feeling he could never wash away. The scene fractured, shifting to a snow-dusted cottage on the border. A family of spies. The parents fell without a sound, clean and efficient. But the mission file had been wrong. It hadn't mentioned the child. The little girl, no older than Miss Yumi, stood in the doorway, a small wooden crow clutched in her hand. She had only watched him with wide, uncomprehending eyes as he melted back into the shadows, leaving her alone in a house of the dead. The toy slipped from her fingers, its clatter on the floorboards an explosion in the silence. The sound echoed louder in his memory than any battle. Then came the Uchiha. The litany of faces, their looks of shock dissolving into nothing as his Tanto opened their throats in a final, silent gasp. The montage of death spun faster, a sickening vortex of faces and blood, until it slammed to a halt on the one that mattered most. He was standing over the body of Fugaku Uchiha. His mentor's eyes were still open, the last light of a proud man extinguished by his student's hand. He felt the phantom weight of Fugaku's hand on his shoulder, heard the ghostly echo of his last poison plea, "Protect her," smile. And then, she was there. Izumi. The rain was falling in his dream now, tracing paths down her face, indistinguishable from the tears that welled in her mature Sharingan. She wasn't looking at the monster in the wolf mask. She was looking through it, at the boy she knew was trapped inside. Her voice was not a scream of terror, but a whisper of profound, soul-shattering heartbreak. "You promised, Naruto. You promised you'd protect my smile." His dreamself, the wolf, raised his blood-soaked Tanto. It was his own voice that echoed in the hollows of his mind, cold and dead as winter stone, repeating the terrible lesson he had forced upon her. Useless weakness, every bond is just a chain. Sever it. The blade trembled, a physical manifestation of the war raging within him. He was screaming a silent, desperate sound trapped in his own skull, but his arm moved with a will of its own. It lunged forward in a cold, efficient arc, the point aimed directly at her heart. He watched, a helpless prisoner in his own mind, as the razor-sharp tip closed a final inch, poised to tear through her. Naruto woke with a choked, silent scream, his hand clamped over his chest, his body drenched in a cold, feverish sweat. For a long moment, there was only the sound of his own ragged breathing in the crushing silence of the hidden safe house. For 2 weeks, this had been his world, a slow, agonizing crawl back from the abyss, haunted by the ghosts of his own making. The Genkai Topperake Mess HM had been his secret ace, the so-called survivable version of a cursed technique. Survivable, he thought, a bitter laugh catching in his throat. What a joke. Survival always had a price. On the night of the massacre, he had not just used the SHM version repeatedly, but stacked the soul-crushing tax of the Susanoo on top of it. The result was a debt paid from his own life force. His Uzumaki vitality was waging a desperate war to stabilize him. A wave of searing agony radiated from his core, a feeling like shredded nerves being scraped over ground glass. He collapsed from his cot, his body seizing as a deep, racking cough tore from his lungs, spattering dark blood onto the dusty floorboards. He grit his teeth, knuckles white, riding the wave of torment until it receded into the familiar chronic ache that was now the baseline of his existence. With trembling hands, he reached for a small, lead-lined pouch, shaking out a single chalky black pill. He swallowed the bitter poison, leaning his head against the cold stone wall as he waited for the chemicals to dull the fire in his veins. He was not healed. He knew he would never be. He was simply functional. A broken weapon reforged just enough to hold an edge. It was time to return to work. His gaze fell upon the white porcelain mask resting on a crate. He reached for it, his fingers tracing the snarling, wolfish features. Just a piece of painted clay, he thought, the internal dismissal a practiced lie. It was more than a disguise. It was a tombstone, the polished white marker for Naruto Namikaze, the son of the Hokage, the friend of Izumi Uchiha, the boy who had once dreamed of a different world. But the final, weary exhalation that fogged the inside of the porcelain, he clipped it into place. The sound was a sharp, definitive click. The boy was gone. The wolf remained. From a hidden compartment, he retrieved a mission scroll sealed with his father's crest. The script was formal, stripped of all warmth. Codename Talon. Target Takuma Hika, Junin. Objective elimination. Circumstances: a decorated war hero using his status to commit atrocities. A public trial would destabilize the Hika and Konoha. He is a cancer protected by his own reputation. Directive elimination. The wolf's gaze was flat. This was not a question of morality. It was a problem that required a solution. He re-rolled the scroll and burned it, the ashes scattering on the floor next to his own dried blood. The tavern on the border of the land of tea smelled of cheap sake, stale smoke, and misery. The wolf sat at the bar, a cloaked phantom nursing cold tea, his senses a web cast across the room. There, in the corner, sat Takuma Hikadrink, arrogant, his hand resting clumsily on his kunai pouch. A bully, not a warrior, the wolf assessed. A weed allowed to grow for too long. When Takuma stood, dragging a terrified serving girl towards a back room, the wolf moved. A simple calculated extension of his leg sent the Jinin stumbling. "Watch it, you." The target never finished. The wolf uncoiled from the stool, a whisper of displaced air. His attack was not a fight, it was an anatomical correction. One gloved hand cupped the back of Takuma's head as his thumb, reinforced with a pinpoint of chakra, pressed into the medulla oblongata. There was a soft, wet pop, a sound swallowed by a peal of drunken laughter. The light in Takuma Hika's eyes went out. He collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. The collective gasp filled the tavern. Before a scream could form, the Sharingan glowed with malevolent crimson light from the voids in the wolf's mask. A crushing genjutsu of sensory stasis descended, freezing every patron in their last moment of shock. In the manufactured silence of this living tableau, the wolf sealed the body into a scroll without a second glance. He wove a second, more intricate illusion, one designed to be permanent. Their memories were seamlessly patched, the arrogant shinobi, and the cloaked figure had never been there. As he released the jutsu, the patrons blinked, a moment of shared inexplicable disorientation passing as quickly as it came. The wolf was already turning away. He left a few coins gleaming on the bar and melted back into the rain-swept night, a ghost who was, in every sense, never truly there. This became the rhythm of his unlife. The dead drop was a massive ancient oak in a forgotten corner of the world, a silent, uncaring confessor. He would arrive under a changing sky, place the scroll containing proof of his work within a hidden hollow, and retrieve the next. The leaves on the ancient oak turned from green to brittle gold, then fell, leaving skeletal branches against a winter sky. Each visit was the same, a dead man's story exchanged for a new target's name. 2 months later. The air in the high canyons of the land of Earth was thin and sharp. Below, an Iwagakure spymaster passed a scroll containing Konoha's border defenses to an information broker. The wolf watched from his perch on a narrow cliff edge, a part of the desolation. The broker collapsed first, a single black senbon in his neck. The Iwa's spymaster spun, his feet suddenly tangled in a nearly invisible shinobi wire. He never got to look up. The wolf descended like a hawk, his tanto sliding cleanly through the spymaster's spine and heart from behind. The bodies crumpled. The wolf moved with unhurried grace, retrieving the stolen intel and sealing the corpses. He brushed his footprints from the dust with a sweep of his cloak, leaving the canyon as empty and desolate as he had found it. A ghost erasing a mistake. He was a tool honed to perfection, a blade that struck from the shadows to protect a peace he could never share. He was a ghost made of his father's will and his friend's dying wish, bound to a path paved with necessary evils. And as he turned to face the biting wind, he did not know if the boy he had buried so deep beneath the mask would ever find his way home. He reached his sanctuary hours later. It was not a bunker or a cave, but the ruins of a small forgotten shrine, tucked deep within a border forest where the maps grew thin. The wooden torii gate had long since collapsed, its remains swallowed by ivy, and the main structure was a skeleton of old cedar beams. It was a place of forgotten faith, a fitting refuge for a boy with a shattered soul. He stepped into the heart of the ruins and finally, carefully, unclipped the wolf mask. The face beneath was pale, thinner than it had been, the boyish roundness of his cheeks now planed into the sharp hard angles of a weapon. The exhaustion was etched into his very being. He sank to the ground, the chronic ache in his chakra network a constant smoldering fire flaring with the release of mission focus. He ran a trembling hand through his blonde hair, the silence a deafening contrast to the roar of his internal pain. He placed his palm on the mossy ground. Kuchius no jutsu. The smoke that erupted was a soft, respectful plume. From it emerged Tsukunami. She had grown. The lanky cub was gone, replaced by a sleek powerful adolescent wolf whose frame now reached his waist. She approached with a silent regal grace, her intelligent blue eyes as ancient as the forest itself locked onto his. She stopped and nudged her head firmly against his shoulder, a profound gesture of grounding and loyalty. A shudder ran through Naruto's frame. Here, with his only true companion, he did not have to be the wolf. "Tell me," he said, his voice a rasp, hoarse from days of disuse, stroking her thick fur. "Tell me everything." Tsukunami lifted her head. "They've given you names, Naruto," she began, her lip curling in wolfish disdain. "The council calls you the Kinslayer. I've heard it whispered in the market, in shouts. They tell a story of a boy driven mad by Anbu service. They say Danzo was a loyal elder who discovered your treason and you slaughtered him to silence him before your rampage." Naruto's hand paused. The lie was perfectly constructed. His father had done his work well. And the village believes it. "They have no reason not to," she answered, her gaze unflinching. "But the story doesn't sit well in your own home. Your father he looks like a man carrying a mountain. The sparks gone from his eyes. And your mother is a storm held behind a wall of glass. She doesn't speak your name, but she searches the crowds, daring them to judge you." His gaze fell, his knuckles white against her silver fur. "And the little one miss you me the other children avoid her now," the wolf continued. "She doesn't understand why the world's grown so cold. She just looks lost." The muscle in Naruto's jaw clenched. The image of his little sister, confused and alone, was a fresh wound, sharp and deep. Is she safe? They are the Hokage's family. No one would dare harm them. But their world is smaller now. Quieter. She paused, letting the weight of it settle. The Uchiha funeral was a public affair. A sea of black under a gray, weeping sky. Mikoto stood at the front with Sasuke and Izumi. "I saw her later, bringing orphans Dango, telling them stories of their parents as heroes. She is their silent keeper." He nodded slowly, the weight of that small mercy a heavy thing. His voice was barely a whisper when he finally spoke the name that was a constant aching presence in his mind. "And Izumi?" Tsukunami was quiet for a long moment. "She didn't fall," she said finally, a note of profound respect in her tone. "In the first weeks, there was only darkness. But Mikoto and Sasuke were her anchors. The blind consuming hatred you feared it didn't take her. Now," she looked at him, her blue eyes sharp, "she doesn't cry, Naruto. She trains. From sunrise until she collapses. Her movements are no longer just precise, they are brutal. The flame in her is different now. She is making herself into a weapon, Naruto. A weapon whose single purpose is to hunt you down and demand the truth." A profound, aching relief washed over him, so potent it was almost painful. He had protected her from the poison of aimless hatred by giving her a target. Him. "Good," he breathed, the word a shard of ice in his heart. "That will keep her safe. That will make her strong. There's more." Tsukunami's tone became grave. "Tsunade is gone. Vanished from the village the day after the funeral. And Jiraiya your father sent him on your trail a month ago. The official record calls it a hunt." "Let him," Naruto said, his voice flat. It was an inevitable complication. "Lastly," she delivered the final piece. "The one you called Eagle, Yumi Hayabusa, has taken a genin team. The Inyazuka girl, the Yamanaka girl and Izumi. I heard her myself. She wants a crank mission to give them their first test in the field." The world seemed to slow, the pieces of the board snapping into place with chilling clarity. Tsunade's departure. Jiraiya's hunt. Izumi's resolve. A perfect unavoidable intersection. He rose and walked to the crumbling entrance of the shrine. "She wants a controlled environment," he said, a bitter, humorless cough disturbing the ancient peace. "A first taste of the world. There are no controlled environments." He turned back, his blue eyes as cold and distant as the stars. "She wants a crank mission," he repeated, his voice the certain tone of the wolf. "I will give her one." The air in the ruined shrine was a still cold thing, thick with the ghosts of forgotten prayers. A small crackling fire pushed back the oppressive darkness, casting long, dancing shadows. The wolf sat with his back against a moss-covered stone altar, a statue carved from duty and exhaustion, waiting. The whisper of displaced air announced her arrival. Tsukunami materialized from the forest's edge with the silent, fluid grace of a hunter. She sat before him and waited. After a long moment, the head of the wolf tilted slightly. "Report." His voice was the sound of rust on a blade. "The mission is concluded," she began, her low, steady growl both report and reassurance. The trap was laid. 3 Chunin mercenaries, paid for a credible performance, engaged Team Hayabusa as predicted. He gave a single, sharp nod. The Inyazuka girl was the first to react, a true vanguard. The Yamanaka girl provided flawless sensory support. They fought as a unit. Her tone shifted subtly. "And Izumi?" The wolf's question was soft, yet it cut through the silence like a shard of glass. Tsukunami's gaze was steady. "She is becoming what you wanted her to be, Naruto. And it is a terrible thing to watch." When the attack came, she did not hesitate. She activated Sharingan, and she moved. She wasn't a genin. She was a scalpel where there used to be a flame. She didn't fight to survive. She fought to end. The wolf did not move, but the air around him tightened. One mercenary broke formation. Izumi intercepted him. There was no wasted movement. A strike to disable the arm, a kunai through the throat. It was clean. Too clean for a first kill. Afterwards, the other two were shaken. Izumi was still. She stood over the body she had made, her eyes analyzing. Not with horror, Naruto. With focus. Naruto remained silent, his gloved hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. "There's something else," Tsukunami delivered the final critical piece of intelligence. "During the engagement, I was concealed on a ridge 100 meters distant. But for a moment, the Junin leader Hayabusa she looked up. Her gaze wasn't a general scan. It was a pinpoint directly at my position. For the first time, the wolf moved. He let out a short, sharp exhalation that was almost a laugh, but held no humor. He tilted the mask back just enough to reveal a mouth set in a grim, bitter line. "She always had excellent sight," he murmured, a memory leaking through the cracks in his armor. "The codename Eagle is no joke." He clipped the mask fully back into place, the click of the lock echoing like a cell door. The flicker of the past was extinguished. "It doesn't matter," the wolf stated, his voice flat once more. "The mission was a success." He turned his masked face back towards the fire. He was alone with the terrible success of his plan, with the chilling knowledge that the weapon he was forging from the girl he loved was growing sharper with every passing day. The flames reflected in the empty eye slits of his mask, a cold borrowed light in a world of his own making. There was one last piece of the larger puzzle that needed to be addressed. "Tsukunami," he asked, his voice flat, devoid of all but strategic concern. "What about the man proclaiming to be Madara? Has the hunting party found anything?" Tsukunami's ears flattened slightly, a sign of frustration not just for the lack of information, but for the power of the foe it implied. "Nothing," she replied, her voice a low growl. "Nothing. No tracks, no whispers, not a single broken twig." She paused, her gaze hardening. "Ever since your encounter with him over a year ago, he has left no trace. He simply vanished from the world." Naruto nodded. 3 months later. The morning sun, weak and pale, filtered through a grimy window, illuminating the steam rising from a simple bowl of rice. The roadside diner was a forgotten stop on a forgotten road, smelling of stale grease, cheap tea, and the damp earth of the surrounding forests. It was a scent of impermanence that Naruto had grown accustomed to. He sat alone, a dark cloak draped over his shoulders, its hood thrown back to reveal a shock of blonde hair that seemed too vibrant for the dreary setting. He ate with a quiet, deliberate focus, the profound stillness in his posture and the cold, flat depth in his blue eyes, marking him as something other than a simple traveler. He was not here by chance. He was here because he had finally been outmaneuvered. Tsukunami's report last night had been unequivocal, delivered in her low, urgent growl. "The toads are close, Naruto. His spies are circling. His network has found you. The net is tightening." For 6 months, he had been a perfect ghost, but he had known it would not be enough. Not against the Sanin Jiraiya, the spymaster whose network spanned the continent. He could run, but the risk of being cornered during a critical mission was an unacceptable variable. A confrontation he did not control was one he could not afford. The wolf, the cold, pragmatic entity he had become, answered for him. It's the only choice. This diner, with its clear lines of sight and predictable civilian witnesses, was the perfect theater for the tragedy he was about to direct. He wasn't preparing to kill an enemy, he was preparing to confront a man to whom he owed his life. The diner's door groaned open, spilling a slash of morning light into the dim interior. The large, broad-shouldered man with a wild mane of white hair stood silhouetted in the doorway, his presence hung the air from the room. The sage's dark, unforgiving eyes swept the room and locked onto the boy in the corner. "He's here," Naruto thought, his own blue eyes remaining fixed on his bowl. He took another slow, calm bite. The mask was in place. The dread was buried. The wolf was ready. The play begins. Jiraiya stalked forward, a storm front of judgment. Each thud of his jetta on the greasy floorboards was a hammer blow. The few other patrons shrank back, trying to become irrelevant as the legendary Sannin brought a tempest into their quiet morning. He stopped at the table, his massive frame casting an oppressive shadow over Naruto. "Naruto," Jiraiya's voice was a low, dangerous growl. "It's over. You're coming back with me. Now." The boy meticulously finished a bite of fish before he finally looked up. Jiraiya met his gaze and felt a jolt. He was prepared for the crimson of a killer. He was not prepared for this. The boy's eyes were bluey placid, unnervingly calm blue. Minato's eyes, but utterly devoid of his warmth. "You're making a scene, pervy sage," Naruto said, his voice a calm, dispassionate monotone. He gestured with his chopsticks to a terrified family where a mother clutched her child. "Are you really going to start a fight here? I thought the great Jiraiya was a protector of the innocent." The sheer, unadulterated goal of the boy to use his own life's creed as a weapon against him was a physical blow. "Don't you dare," Jiraiya hissed, his self-control shredding as his killing intent washed out in a palpable wave. "Don't you dare speak to me of protecting anyone. Not after you butchered an entire clan in their beds." Naruto took another slow bite, unaffected. "I did what was necessary." Necessary? The word cracked in Jiraiya's throat, the fury giving way to a raw, heartbroken disbelief. "Slaughtering men, women, even your own master, was it necessary?" Naruto set his chopsticks down, a flicker of cold, dismissive pity in his eyes. "You still don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice unnervingly quiet. "I didn't do it because I had to. I did it because I wanted to." He leaned back. "A shinobi of my caliber is not meant to be leashed to a village like a dog. I am a force of nature. I don't need a master anymore. And I don't need saving." He placed the cup down, the soft click a final, punctuating note. His gaze, as cold and hard as the bottom of a well, locked with Jiraiya's. "So, we have two options," Naruto stated, a flat, chilling declaration. "Either you sit down and wait patiently until I have finished my meal, and then we can go outside where you can attempt to bring me in. Or, we can start right now." He paused, his gaze flicking for a fraction of a second to the cowering family, then back to Jiraiya. "But I promise you, if we fight in here, they will not survive it." A ghost of a smile, utterly devoid of warmth, touched his lips. "And I will enjoy my breakfast over their corpses." He picked up his chopsticks again. "Your choice." Jiraiya was trapped. He looked at the cold, merciless face before him and then at the terrified family. He could not, would not, be the reason those civilians died. Naruto had weaponized his very soul against him. With a growl of pure impotent rage, Jiraiya slammed his fist on the table. "Fine," he snarled, his voice thick with loathing. "We do this your way. I'll wait." He dropped into the chair opposite Naruto. The boy, in response, calmly resumed eating. Jiraiya sat in that stony silence, his mind a raging tempest. This had to be a mask. He had to break through. He searched the boy's face for a sign, a flicker of the past, a hint of the grief that had to be driving this madness. He met the boy's gaze and found only a placid, empty abyss. "What happened to you, Naruto?" Jiraiya began, his voice a low, pained rasp. "The boy I knew, where did he go?" The boy at the table paused. "That boy was weak," he said. "He was prey. The world is a place of predators and prey, pervy sage. I simply decided I would no longer be the latter." "A convenient excuse," Jiraiya shot back. "What about your parents? You've destroyed your family." The boy looked at Jiraiya with something that resembled pity. "They raised a shinobi. A weapon. Did they truly expect the weapon they forged not to have a will of its own? Their pain is a consequence of their own sentimentality. It is irrelevant." "Irrelevant?" Jiraiya's voice cracked. "They love you, you damn fool." "Love is a bond," the boy replied, his voice flat. "And bonds are chains. They make you slow and weak." The Uchiha were bound by their foolish attachments. Look where it got them. That was the final straw. The last flicker of hope in Jiraiya's eyes died, replaced by a profound and terrible disappointment. He had looked for the boy and found only a monster. He leaned back, his voice a near whisper laced with a quiet venomous regret. "I should have known," he breathed. "That night when I found you were just a kid, bleeding out in the mud. I didn't let you die." He looked at the unfeeling face before him, his own eyes shining with unshed tears. "If I had known this is what you would become, I swear on my master's grave, I would have left you to rot in that clearing." He took a shaky breath. "I am so disappointed in you, Naruto." The boy at the table registered the words with a placid blink of utter indifference. He then calmly picked up his teacup, taking a slow final sip before placing it down with a soft click. "I'm finished," he said. "Let's go." They walked out into a dreary gray canvas. A fine cold drizzle had begun to fall, turning the dirt clearing into a slick muddy stage. The moment they were clear, the fragile truth shattered. "You're not getting away, brat." Jiraiya roared, his hands a blur of seal's Ninmahari jism. His hair erupted outwards, an inescapable net of death. Naruto didn't move, he flowed backward, a serene, impossible motion. He didn't outrun the storm of needles, he danced between them, his cloak fluttering untouched. "Is that all?" His voice was a flat echo. "I expected more, pervy sage." "Don't get arrogant." Jiraiya bellowed, charging forward to crush him with taijutsu. He swung a fist that could shatter stone. Naruto simply wasn't there. He sidestepped with the fluidity of water parting around a rock. Jiraiya's fist sent a shockwave through the earth. Naruto was already circling, a silent mockery of Jiraiya's power. Fine. Jiraiya snarled, leaping back. Kaiten Gameu Enden. He spewed a torrent of toad oil, followed by a jet of fire. The world erupted in a raging inferno. Through the shimmering heat, Jiraiya saw him, standing calmly on a high branch on the far side of the blaze, utterly untouched. Desperation began to seep into Jiraiya's soul. I'm done playing games, Naruto. Nin Ranja Shigami no Jutsu. His hair came alive, extending like a mass of white serpents, a cage of unstoppable force that coiled around Naruto's limbs and torso. Jiraiya felt the satisfying, solid weight of a perfect capture. The figure in his grasp did not struggle. It simply looked at him through the smoke, its placid blue eyes holding a flicker of cold, profound pity. Then, the form went limp. It didn't poof into smoke or revert to a log. It crumbled. The solid weight in his grasp vanished as the boy's form broke apart into a cascade of feathers and fine gray dust, dissolving into a massive, silent swarm of pale, ghostly Ural owls. They billowed outwards, their dark, soulless eyes a jury of silent, judging ghosts. Jiraiya was left clutching nothing but a tangled, empty mass of his own hair. The swarm of owls hovered for a surreal moment before they all turned as one, a silent river of feathers that melted into the bruised twilight sky. Jiraiya stood frozen. His mind refused to process what his eyes had seen. Then, the world began to peel away. The inferno, the rain, the charred treacle of it, dissolved like ink in water. He was left standing in the real clearing, untouched, alone. A single word escaped his lips, a ragged, disbelieving whisper. Genjutsu? He stumbled back, desperately trying to find the seam where the illusion had begun. And then, the crushing realization hit him. It was in the diner. He had been so focused on the emotional battle that he had missed the most fundamental rule: while fighting Sharingan users never meet their gaze. But his eyes were blue. A genjutsu within a genjutsu. The entire conversation, every word, every emotional jab, every devastating, heartbreaking confession, had set it all to an empty chair. The real Naruto had been gone before Jiraiya had even opened his mouth. He had poured his heart out to a phantom. The cold, hollow laugh escaped Jiraiya's lips, the sound of a man's spirit shattering. The great Toad Sage, the master of spies, had been utterly and completely blind. Miles away, perched on a high mountain peak that touched the belly of the clouds, sat the real Naruto. Jiraiya's final words echoed in the silence of his mind, not as a memory from a genjutsu, but as a fresh bleeding wound. If I had any idea this is what you would become, I swear on my master's grave, I would have left you to rot in that clearing. A single hot tear escaped his eye, tracing a path through the dust on his cheek, before he angrily swiped it away. The world is a cruel truth, and it teaches its lesson with or without your consent. Author's notes. I had other plans for this chapter, however. After writing a certain scene, I changed my mind and abandoned those ideas in favor of Tsukunami's report to Naruto. I want to point out that Jiraiya wasn't fighting seriously because of Minato's order to bring Naruto back to the village alive under normal circumstances. This would have been a fight to the death, and Naruto had no reason to fight seriously, as he was simply stalling for time to escape from Jiraiya. And it was an illusion. It's a disappointing battle scene, right? But this isn't the final showdown between those two. Words said by Jiraiya definitely hurt. Now concerning preview, it's a short one because I feel like it's enough. Preview. The forest held its breath, the air within the forgotten shrine was still and heavy with the scent of damp stone and decay. The sudden, silent gust of wind, born from nothing, stirred the blanket of fallen leaves on the ground. They did not scatter. Instead, a swirl of them, dry and brittle, rose into the air, dancing in a tight, impossible vortex. The Papyrthon leaves coalesced, folding and shaping themselves with an unnatural precision, until they formed a human silhouette. She stood in the heart of the ruins, a figure of profound and quiet grace. A high-collared dark cloak, simple and unadorned, shrouded her form. Its heavy fabric fell in a way that hinted at the slender, womanly curves beneath. Her amber eyes held a deep, weary calm, eyes of someone who had witnessed the end of the world more than once. With a whisper of movement that barely disturbed the dust, she settled gracefully onto the cold stones. Her posture was one of absolute stillness, an effigy of patience awaiting her target. She closed her eyes, letting the profound silence of the shrine settle over her like a shroud. Thanks for listening to my video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment below your favorite part. Sayonara, see you in the next video.